Class is in session, hitting the books. Pub Sports Radio, we're with you a day later than usual, but we are here Tuesday, September 5th, as usual, giving you the first look at the college football card for the upcoming week. Ian Cameron, Conor Mack. C-Mac, it's good to have that first full week of college football in the books. Now we get into our normal routine. NFL takes over on Sundays, so you've got your weeknight college football, Saturday college football. And this is always a fascinating week to handicap these games, Conor, because you're talking about overreaction week. You know, do you make too much of a big deal of the teams that look great? Do you make too much of a big deal of the teams that looked awful in week one? And it provides some interesting decisions that we have in front of us here for this second week.
It does. You know, there's always the week 0/week 1, how are they going to perform? And we saw some teams not show up. As Saturday, I had a few tough losses. I just wish Thursday, Friday, Sunday night, Monday night, all those bets cash. So I just wish my Saturday was a little bit better. I had a tough loss on the over in the Boston College game, as it was only 7 points there at half. So that was a shitty. I had a couple tough beats, but yeah, overreaction here. But we do have some really, really good matchups. So I'm ready to get into it. Let's break it down. Pound.
Absolutely. Shout out to everyone in the chat. And it kind of mirrored my weekend as well. I had a good Thursday, not the greatest Friday. Saturday was up and down, but it was a clean sweep of Sunday. You know, Oregon State cashes, Florida State cashes, Duke cashes in last night. Hell, who the hell needs 13 points? Duke wins that game outright against Clemson. And, it's going to be interesting to see.
Real quick, I like that people got to see our guy, Riley Leonard, on the big stage, big moment. We talked about him all year. Not only were they good, they were good against the number, 9-4. And that was a huge game at home with those points. So I love it. And we'll see question marks with Clemson always when one of these big teams lose, week one.
Kind of looks like Clemson of last year, Conor, just through one game where their defense was good enough. Their defense was solid for the most part in that game. I think they just got tired in the fourth quarter when Duke started to run it down their throat. They've just been out on the field so much. But are they going to have another year with quarterback questions? You know, they've had Taj Boyd, they've had Deshaun Watson, they've had Trevor Lawrence, they've had some great quarterbacks at Clemson, and DJU didn't go well there, and they cut bait. He ended up leaving to Oregon State, where actually consequently played very well on Sunday. And now they turn to Cade Klubnik, and I'll be honest, Cade Klubnik hasn't been firing on all cylinders. I didn't love his play down the stretch last year. And again, last night, not great. Now the O-line's got to be better. I think they are devoid of some skill and speed and playmakers at wide receiver. I think that's a bit of a problem right now for Clemson as well. So definitely some things for Dabo to figure out. But it's one game, and we always say this with some of even the teams that look bad, you got to be a little bit careful with just throwing them in the garbage chute, after just one performance. So that's what we're going to aim to do with these games here for this card, is we're going to see who, last week can keep going if they played well, and who, if they didn't play well, maybe has a chance to also turn things around. We'll see how it goes. But let's begin with the only weeknight game in FBS this week, and it's on Friday night, Illinois taking on Kansas. We've got Kansas currently about a 3-point home favorite here in this game. The total bet up slightly. 55 was the opener. Now seeing 56.5 here in this game. I wasn't impressed with Illinois, even in a win last week against Toledo. I thought defense showed some holes that were concerning to me a little bit. Daquan Finn ends up throwing for 230 yards passing in that game. The combination of Jaquez Stewart and Daquan Finn, who is a mobile quarterback, dual threat, they combined for over 150 rushing yards. As a team, Toledo had 186 rushing yards. And, for an Illinois defense that was so stout last year, you don't necessarily expect that kind of success from Toledo running the ball, but they did. I thought Illinois, we talked about them, Altmaier, a steady game. He didn't light it up. It wasn't a ton of explosiveness in the Illinois offense, but boy, he made that incredible play late to lead Illinois into field goal position to win that game. He just threw the ball downfield with big pressure on him, and he ended up completing it to give them that opportunity. He also ran 69 yards. He's got some athleticism to him. You look at Josh McCray, Reggie Love, the third, obviously big time shoes to fill when Chase Brown departs from last year's team, but they ended up having 88 rushing yards combined. Didn't have the success running the football as much as I think they had hoped, but they get the win 30-28. You can't really say too much about Kansas. I mean, they played Missouri State, an FCS team, and they were able to get the job done. And they were able to get the job done even though they rested their number one quarterback. Jalen Daniels didn't play in that game. He's been battling an injury. They wanted to make sure he was good to go for this game. It looks like he is probable to start here for Kansas. Jason Bean was the quarterback against Missouri State, and he's a very capable backup. In fact, he's a very good backup. You saw what he did last year at times for Kansas when Daniels got hurt. He was able to come in there and play quite well. This is a tough game from a side perspective because Illinois is one of those teams that I said coming into the year, I like to be, not fall off as some people thought, losing DeVito at quarterback, losing Chase Brown at running back, but it didn't overly impress me as much as I thought they would, considering I laid the points with Illinois against Toledo, having to survive and win that game. And I know I'm high on Kansas. I was last year for sure. The question's going to be, how do they fare here? They're going to have Daniels most likely back at quarterback. More than anything in this game, I'm looking more at the total. I think we could see points. You factor in Kansas's offensive strengths. They're going to play up tempo. They can run it. They can throw it. And if you look at Illinois and what they want to do, they want to run the football. So it's going to be the fast-paced, up-tempo offense of Kansas versus the run-heavy, slow-it-down offense of Illinois. But the weakness for Kansas is the defensive front. I think their secondary is actually the strength of that defense. But the defensive front was bullied a bit last year, and teams could run on them. And I think over time you could see improvement there. But I think if you're Illinois, you're going to be able to have some success running the football, and that's going to make the whole offense better because Illinois is one of those teams where when they can't run the football, it's hard for them to execute at a high level on offense. So as of right now, I don't have a bet on the side, but I do have some interest in this total up and over 56.5 as long as the weather. And I think the weather is going to be fine Friday night. I'm seeing 32 degrees Celsius over in the 90s Fahrenheit. Very hot night coming up Friday night in Lawrence, Kansas for this game. Conor, what do you think here? Illinois, Kansas, Friday night lights.
Yeah, Friday night lights. The only real game here Friday night. I think this might be the only time, but I'm not sure. I have to go through that. Let's go through Illinois. Bielema talked about it. I thought the defense was soft. Obviously, we all think Toledo maybe is the best team in the MAC, or top 2 or 3. As the MAC kind of got destroyed. Somebody just put that in the chat. They had a rough time. ATS Toledo, the only one covering in that one. I thought they were okay, but for how experienced this defense is, they kind of just got gashed. Really, through the air over about 200, but the ground was what surprised me. You mentioned about almost 190 yards on the ground there. I think Altmaier was okay. That's basically what he's going to do. He's just like a simple quarterback, try not to make too many mistakes. He did have a pick in this one. Kansas, they want Jalen Daniels back, obviously. And I don't know if he's a go with the back. We're going to have to wait with that. You talked about Bean. He came in last year, solid backup. And then, he'll be solid if he has to play in this one. I can't hear with Kansas. I do think they're a little bit weaker defensively. I'm leaning to Illinois in the points, but I wanted to get to the total. If that defense is the same with Illinois, you're right. This game will have a bunch of points and go over. But I think hitting practice, it's back to 101 here. Drills, all that stuff for Illinois that everyone thought would be a top 10, even maybe a top 5 defense. So Kansas overs their money. You know that, Babano, and that's why you're looking to the over here. I mean, the last 5. But Kansas hasn't been good against the number as they were the darlings last year, the first 8 or 9 weeks. They're also 0-5 the last 5 against the number. So I look at under. I think this might be too high, but I need to see more throughout the week here. This is a wait, but I'm looking the other way on this total.
All right, looking at maybe the under here with Illinois, Kansas. It's one of those games where it's, Kansas is explosive offensively, and Illinois is going to run heavy, and of course the running clock means an offense like Illinois, that's good for the under because they run the ball so much, and now the clock no longer stops after every first down. But my concern, you're right, was that defense of Illinois. When you're giving up 28 points to Toledo, and especially if Jalen Daniels plays at quarterback in this game for Kansas, that's not what I want to see from a defense going on the road against a team like this. We'll see, though, if Jalen is able to suit up at QB for Kansas after they rested him last week and gave Jason Bean the start, knowing that they beat Missouri State anyway, even with Jason Bean at quarterback. All right, let's go to Saturday. We've got Vanderbilt and Wake Forest. Wake Forest, 10.5-point home favorites in this game, 57.5 the total in this game. Now, for the first time this season, we've got Vanderbilt in a point spread role where I'm interested in them. 10.5, getting this kind of points. Obviously Hawaii, I was on Hawaii with the points against Vanderbilt in their first game of the season, and it was pretty much a wire-to-wire point spread cover. And in fact, if you're Vanderbilt, you're damn fortunate you won the game. You were out-yarded. You were outgained by Hawaii. You even had a punt or a kick return touchdown, on your side in that game, Vanderbilt. And they needed it. They needed everything they could get in order to just escape with that win against Hawaii. They ended up playing an FCS squad last week, Alabama A&M, and obviously they rolled a victory 47-13 in that game, but it's hard to evaluate that. I do like the quarterback, A.J. Swan for Vanderbilt. I think he's been pretty solid so far, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception on the season so far for this Commodores offense, which has been good to see. But now you're going to face by far your toughest opponent yet, with all due respect to Hawaii here, facing a Wake Forest. Wake Forest, though, off a win against Elon, new quarterback this year, of course, Mitch Griffiths taking over this year at the quarterback position. He had 329 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception against Elon. But now you're asking this, relatively young, and at least as far as starting quarterback experience is concerned, inexperienced quarterback, laying 10.5 here at home. From all indications, Wake Forest defense has the potential to be a lot better this year. We know last year they had their issues. We saw them give up, 48 to Louisville, 30 to NC State. UNC did damage against them. Duke put up 34 against them last year. So the defense was a problem for Dave Clawson's team last year. I think they're better on that side of the football. Am I ready to trust them laying 10.5? Not really. This is the first time this year I'm considering a bet with Vandy, and I certainly lean that way, getting more than 10 with them here as a road underdog. What do you think here, Conor? Vandy, Wake Forest?
Yeah, I think this is too many points in this one. I thought if we saw double digits with this Wake team, because I'm not buying it. They might be a little bit better football team, but I don't know this high. I was thinking 6.5 with this game. You talked about it. I think Vandy, when it went even to last year, they did get blown out in the last game of the year against Tennessee. They got kind of their ass whipped 56-0, but they had some good wins against Florida. And this is where we want them, like you just talked about, as a dog here. And I just don't know what to make of Wake. Griffiths, like you talked about, Hartman's gone. They still have some skilled guys. I don't trust the defense. I really don't trust both these teams' defense. Just from initial look, I kind of lean over. I'll wait on this total a little bit more. But yeah, I think for us right now, you got to gobble these points with Vanderbilt in what could be a close game.
Yeah, Griffiths looked fine last week, but again, you have to compare it to your competition level, and you're facing Elon. Like, how much can you?
They looked all right, good, but Elon.
No, I think this is a few too many points. I agree with you. Vandy or pass for me, and it sounds like the same for Connor Mack. And I don't hate the overlook, and it's dropping. Keep an eye on the weather. And by the way, note the start time. Make sure if you're going to bet this game, get your bets in. It's 11 a.m. Eastern. This game kicks off on Saturday morning, so it's an hour earlier, an hour before the first games kick off on Saturday. So just make sure you're aware of the start time. All right, Notre Dame, NC State. Next up, Notre Dame, 7.5-point road favorites here, 51 being the total in this game. And I've been going back and forth with this because so much of your week 2 it's week it's going to be the third game for those teams that played in week 0, but for most teams, it's their second game. And when you go from game 1 to game 2, you have to evaluate. Last week with NC State, who got the win but did not get the point spread cover against UConn last week, and Conor and I like the points there with the Huskies. It cashes in. Was NC State just not as good as odds makers thought they would be, or was UConn better than maybe odds makers thought they would be? So that's the determining factor here going into this week. Here's what I liked about NC State. I thought their offense was solid, and you have the Brennan Armstrong, Robert and I connection going back to Virginia. Those two were together there, QB and OC, a couple of years ago, where that offense just absolutely took off and had a huge year for the Cavaliers. But the offense, was solid against UConn, but they had their starts and stops in that football game. But part of me thinks UConn could be a lot better on the defensive side of the football. So while they kind of labored their way to the points they ended up getting, NC State, it was 24 that they ended up scoring in that 24-14 win, but it didn't feel like it was an easy 24 points. They had to really grind for everything they got. Armstrong had 155 passing yards, ran for 96. They didn't run the football nearly as well with Jordan Houston as I maybe thought they would. But I think UConn is improved on the defensive side of the football, and that's something to keep in mind. I still think if you're projecting NC State's offense moving forward, I think this is going to be a pretty good offense. And I certainly think it's got the potential to have a little bit more explosiveness and dynamic attributes to it than we saw last year. Because keep in mind, run heavy. Devin Leary's a solid quarterback, but he's more of a dink and dunk intermediate passer quarterback. Now you're going to have a guy that's going to stretch the field a little bit here with Brennan Armstrong. So I expect the offense to be good for NC State this season moving forward, and maybe in this game here as well against Notre Dame. And I certainly like what I see on the offensive side of the football so far this season from Notre Dame. Granted, Tennessee State and Navy is not exactly a murderer's row of 2 games to start the season. But still, everything we've seen, albeit against some weak defensive competition, Notre Dame should be able to have success offensively this year. You bring in a Sam Hartman who has just played an incredible amount of college football. The experience that he has is off the charts. He's an extremely accurate quarterback. He's working with, I think a pretty solid O-line, very good O-line. Jack Alt in particular, he's going to be going high in the NFL draft in that left tackle spot for Notre Dame. But he's been very, very impressive. Part of me coming into the season said, wow, they're really going to miss Michael Mayer. But, from what I've seen, this is a Notre Dame offense that's still got enough to go around. They got the quarterback. They've got the good O-line. They've got Jaden Thomas, Chris Tyree, at wide receiver. Audric Estime, a very, very strong running back. Not only has he got the burst in the open field, but he's powerful too. It's very tough to bring him down. So I think this is a very, very good Notre Dame offense. I kind of think this game has some points in it. I came into the season thinking NC State could start to play to some overs this season because the defense not nearly as good, in my opinion, this year. Now, they were solid against UConn, but you're talking about Joseph Fagnano, an offense that doesn't have the speed and the playmakers on the perimeter and the outside that maybe Notre Dame is going to throw at them here. I think it's going to be a much greater challenge for the stop unit for Dave Doran's NC State squad. So I'm more interested in the total here as far as the side is concerned. Notre Dame, I think they win the game. Do I want to lay 7.5 here on the road? I'm not so sure about that considering how weak their competition has been, but I think this offense could really have a pretty big day here against NC State. And conversely, I think the NC State offense, like I said, going forward will continue to be, I think, a better unit this year on that side of the ball than they were last year with Brennan Armstrong at quarterback and Robert and I at OC. And I don't know how good Notre Dame's defense is. You haven't played anybody yet. And Navy had one of the worst offensive game plans I think I've ever seen against this Notre Dame defense. Everything was 2 yards in a cloud of dust. Where was this shotgun offense and throwing the ball a little bit that they promised everybody going into the season? We didn't see it from Navy. So how much was Notre Dame's defense tested, really, in that game? So I think we see enough points. We're not asking for an ultimate shootout here. The total's only 51. I think it can get over that number. What do you think here, Conor? Notre Dame, NC State.
One thing real quick on the total, Notre Dame too. Been a good moneymaker to the over. 8 of its last 9. Going back to last year. I've gone over. So if you do like this over, but I think this is where NC State at home, the defense needs to turn up in this one. Notre Dame has played nobody you talked about. I mean, Navy is just in a whole kind of rebuild. Like you talked about, the offense was nowhere to be found. And Tennessee State, come on. I mean, I guess you play who's in front of you. So congrats to Notre Dame. Still haven't given up a touchdown. And I want to see this Notre Dame defense. But is this the offense that I really think can explode against them? Maybe, because I still have question marks. As good as Brennan Armstrong is, I've seen the good, I've seen the bad with him. And I thought he was just subpar against UConn. He threw for 155. He almost had 100 yards on the ground. So, but one problem here, I think there's a little too much love right now to Notre Dame. Now you go to the road, hostile environment, over a touchdown here. I am looking at NC State catching the 7.5, 8. I think I'm going to stay off the total as of right now. Babano, Notre Dame will be tested. Can they get it out of there with a win? Maybe cover? Yeah, but I think if they do, I think this game is tight. So I like the points here.
All right, liking the home dog here is Conor Mack early in the week. NC State plus the point. Shout out to everyone in the chat quickly. Raymond Reichart, Canes Nation, Wyatt Para, Kong's Clips, Wine Time Sports, Tommy Robinson, Shays White, Bill McHugh, Johnny K, everyone in the chat, Jay Smooth, Ross Pitts. Shout out to everyone in the chat. 49 live viewers. Hit the like button. We appreciate it very much. A reminder, all these individual game previews will be available for archived viewing later on today on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. All right, let's move along. Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. We've got the Pitt Panthers 7.5-point home favorites, 47.5 the total in this game. One of those situations where, look, Pittsburgh plays Wofford, Cincinnati plays Eastern Kentucky. Both teams play FCS foes last week. So how much can you really take away from both of those games? From what I saw from Cincinnati, there's a lot of concern I had about the Bearcats coming into this season. And look, again, they didn't play anybody either last week, but I was impressed with what I saw actually from this Cincinnati team. Scott Satterfield taking over, of course, as a head coach of the Bearcats. And Emory Jones, we talk about this, theme so many times where sometimes your quarterback goes from lesser and lesser schools and he ends up transferring here, transferring there, and he doesn't always get better, even as he goes from school to school. Look at JT Daniels, by the way, for Rice as a perfect example of that last week against Texas. Sometimes when you bounce around and you transfer from multiple schools, maybe you're just not that good, a quarterback. But I was impressed with Emory Jones. We know he was at Florida for those couple of years where he's got the athleticism, can run with the ball, but decision-making, he had that 13 interception season in 2021 at Florida, which wasn't very good. Arizona State, he had an up and down year there. But now here he is in Cincinnati, and man, he looked like a dynamic playmaker. I mean, 4 incomplete passes, threw the ball 23 times, 19 of them complete. So only 4 incomplete passes, 345 yards, 5 touchdowns, 66-13 victory over Eastern Kentucky. Now, again, you have to factor in who the opponent was. So, how good of a performance was it when now you're going on the road and you're facing a FBS team that's historically under Pat Narduzzi, had a pretty good defense, especially the defensive line. I can't count how many times we've thought Pitt's defensive line loses this guy, this guy, this guy. Where's their pass rush going to be? Where's their ability to stop the run going to come from? And every year they kind of reload at that position. So this is going to be a taller order now for Cincinnati in terms of can they block, can they protect for Emory Jones? And he needs that because he's had those issues with interceptions in the past. You look at Pitt, they got the job done, obviously, last week against Wofford. In that game, they ended up having a pretty solid, I'll be honest, I think to me it's an addition by subtraction at quarterback. Now, how good Pittsburgh's going to be at the quarterback position with Phil Jurkovec remains to be seen. And can he stay healthy for a full season? It remains to be seen. That's been a huge issue with Phil Jurkovec, the Boston College transfer. But the one thing he does have is I think the O-line is still a work in progress. But, hey, I think Phil Jurkovec, even with an O-line that's a work in progress for Pitt this season, can't be any worse than the Boston College O-line he was behind for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's the reason why they got him hurt and got him injured. So, Phil Jurkovec, though, is a nice experienced addition. I like the guy. I think he can play. As long as he's got a good, well-blocked and protected O-line in front of him, I think he can still go out there and be an efficient, effective college football quarterback. And I'll certainly take him over Keaton Slovis. That guy doesn't do anything for me. Keaton Slovis, I'd like, see ya. Don't let the door hit your ass on the way out is probably what I would have said to him after he was with Pitt last year. Let's be real, though. I mean, Pitt is still trying to find that surefire quarterback to lead this offense, post Kenny Pickett era. And they're finding that, it's pretty difficult. Slovis didn't pan out last year. And it's work in progress with Jurkovec, but I still think if Jurkovec is healthy and the O-line is steady, he can be more productive and effective and lead this team to better offensive success than Keaton Slovis did last year for Pitt. So that's the way I see it here going into this season for them. As far as the run game, we see Rodney Hammond leading them there. Cincinnati, defensively, again, very good last week, but let's see if they can keep that up here against this Pittsburgh Panthers team. Pitt's not a team I'm looking to lay points in this range with very often. That's just the way it is. But the problem is I don't know how good Cincinnati is. Cincinnati just walked all over Eastern Kentucky. And yes, it was impressive putting 66 points on the board. And Emory Jones looked as good as he's played at quarterback, in anywhere. Florida, Arizona State, Cincinnati put together. Maybe not a better game from Emory Jones than what we saw against Eastern Kentucky. But factor in the opponent. Factor in now that you're going on the road for this game. Factor in that now you're playing a much better defense here, the Pitt Panthers. So let's see how he fares in it. I don't have a strong feel on this game, but at more than a touchdown, I'll give a slight lean to the Bearcats side, plus the 7.5. Probably lean under the total. As much as you see 66 points for Cincinnati, and as much as you see Pitt putting up a decent number against Wofford, let's see how they fare here. And both teams basically facing a step up in competition here this week. What do you think here, Conor? Cincy Pitt.
Yeah, I did not have a ton for this game because, like you talked about, they both beat up on some scrub schools and they both looked pretty good. I don't know what to make of them. You mentioned, Emory Jones. I saw enough of him that I don't know, but maybe a move to Cincinnati is good. And it's one game, it's 1 week. But is Cincy maybe, this would be big if they got to win. A lot of people down on Cincinnati weren't going to win a ton of games this year. So this could be one that they could get. One thing is Pitt, I think, is always solid at home. You talked about Narduzzi, always has a pretty good defense that comes to play. And yeah, can Phil Jurkovec stay healthy? I thought when he was healthy, he could look good at times at Boston College. And you mentioned the bad offensive line he had to deal with there. I think this game could be close, so I'd have to lean. I think it's just a little bit too money. As much as I Pitt here at home, I think they win just over the touchdown. I can't be on it.
I think it's a fair number, and it's one of those games where if Pitt's less than a touchdown, I'm more interested in Pitt. And now that they're above, they're laying more than a touchdown. And there actually has been a slight trickle of Cincinnati money because Pittsburgh was 8 earlier in the week. Now they're down to 7.
I get it.
Yeah. So I think it's a 1-score game. So I definitely lean to Cincy here in this one. All right, James Madison and Virginia next up. How about this? JMU, the Dukes, a full touchdown favorite on the road in this game, albeit it's a little bit of a state battle here, little brother versus big brother. But how about little brother laying a touchdown here on the road? 40.5 being the total in this game. This is a bet I made early in the week because I said, you know what? I know James Madison's going to take money. And sure enough, 6.5, I got James Madison minus 6.5, and now it's painted across the board, -7. If you watched Virginia last week, you know why James Madison took some money, and you know why they're a road favorite here in this game. Virginia was terrible, absolutely awful. Tony Elliott has not been the answer so far, now in year 2 with Virginia. And we got to ask ourselves, too, with Tony Elliott, how good of a coach and how good of a coordinator was he at Clemson? Because he got the head coaching job at Virginia because of what he did as the offensive coordinator under Dabo Swinney at Clemson. But when you think about what's happened with Clemson, how much of it was, hell of a coordinating job by Tony Elliott. How much of it was, he got to work with Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, generational quarterbacks at Clemson for much of your time there. So I've not been impressed with him from a coaching standpoint, from an X's and O's perspective, from an in-game adjustments standpoint. There's nothing I've seen out of Tony Elliott that tells me he's able to handle this position he's in. It's been rough. Even the defense for Virginia, with the offense just lacking a ton of great receivers and skill position talent this year, with the O-line in an absolute shambles. And if you watched that game last week, you know how bad that Virginia offensive line, on paper, how bad it looked coming into the season. And it was played out that way in the game against Tennessee last week at Nissan Stadium, home of the Titans. 4 sacks, no ability to get a push at the line of scrimmage and run the football effectively at all. And then, of course, at quarterback, you got the Musket man. And no, I'm not talking about that horse that was in the Triple Crown 15 years ago or whatever. Tony Musket, the quarterback for Virginia, just not very good. Only 9 completions, not exactly someone that's going to escape the pocket easily. And it was just a disaster on both sides of the ball. Virginia's defense, couldn't really stop Joe Milton and the Tennessee offense, although that's a very difficult offense. And when they get that rhythm going and they're, sustaining drives and gaining first downs and they're working their tempo, it can really, really, really just completely wear down and wear out a defense. And we saw that against Virginia last week. And then their offense, they're not the come from behind type of offense. Virginia falls behind in a game this season by like 14 or more points, they're fucked. Seriously. I mean, they have no come from behind possibility with their offense in the shape that it's in right now. So that's concerning. Look, obviously there's been a reaction to Virginia's poor performance. People know James Madison was well equipped for FBS football last year. They were a point spread machine. They certainly surpassed expectations with the year they had last year. But man, I'm telling you what, this as much as you would think, hey, we can get 7 points here with Virginia as a home dog, there was just nothing really at all to like from them in that game and in that performance last week. So JMU, to me, when you look at what they've got, to be honest with you, their defense, I think, is really, really good. I don't know, Tennessee was able to shut them down. So maybe you ask yourself, can James Madison duplicate that? But, I think they're a really good defensive football team. And they are probably going to give Virginia similar problems, and then on the offensive side of the football, you look at what they have there this year, you bring it. I think they're really, really well coached. Kurt Signetti, they've got an offensive line that's got pretty solid group there. There's some turnover in the skill position group, but I think when you look at it, there's definitely reasons to think this team's going to be able to move the ball. They've got a very experienced quarterback in McLeod. Remember, Todd Centeio was their quarterback last year. He's moved on, so it's McLeod, the quarterback here for James Madison. I just think it's asking a lot for Virginia to do much of anything in a positive right now. Not to mention Musket's also questionable because he left that game against Tennessee with an injury. He was just getting beaten to shit in that game by the Vols defense, and it finally had an impact on him to the point where he had to leave that game. So there's question. His status is questionable. Anthony Calandria had to come into that game and take over down the stretch. So quarterback status up in the air as to who starts for Virginia in this game. Bottom line is I laid 6.5 with JMU. And even if this line does creep up to a number where I think, wow, it's gotten too carried away with how much James Madison is laying in this game, I can always buy back a little Virginia. I'm not even sure I'll do that, though, because if you don't have Virginia as a bottom 5, Power 5 team in the country right now, you're not doing your power ratings correctly. Simple as that. You're not. That's how bad this team is right now. They didn't have a good year at all last year. They are right there with some of the worst teams in Power 5 conference college football right now, in my opinion. Conor, what do you think here? James Madison, Virginia.
Yeah, they are. And, that's why the move here has been to James Madison. You know what? I think if you got under the touchdown, you got to feel pretty good. One thing, even with James Madison, as bad as Virginia is, which I'll get to them in one sec, it's not easy to go on the road and win by a touchdown, but maybe they are that bad you're talking about. They just are this bad right now. You mentioned Musket. He got knocked out of that game. The backup Calandria, I don't think is any better. He went 2 for 7. They were, 200 yards total. Barely they got that. They were 5 of 18 on third downs. They just didn't do anything. I think Tennessee's pretty good, solid defense, but I don't know about great or elite. So I get the move. We have this low total because I don't know how Virginia's going to put up any points. So even at 43 now, although dropping to 41, I lean under. But I'm off. I just in the end, I don't want either side here.
Yeah, that's the problem with the total here in this game is, can Virginia score enough to help you out? I mean, it is going to be the big question. And now there's concern about whether it's not like they're going to Musket didn't play well. So it's not like, Calandria can't be as good or better, but, you still got that question. And to me, he wasn't all that much better when he entered the game for Musket last week. So it's just a lot of problems all around, especially on the offensive side of the football right now for this Virginia squad.
Can the Virginia defense help them out this week? Maybe that, and I think McLeod's okay. I don't know, how great he is. So, that's another reason why I'm a little tentative, especially now at almost a touchdown late.
Well, here's the thing too about Jordan McLeod. He was at South Florida, obviously, before that, and Arizona. Always had talent, but kind of some tough situations here. And it's not like James Madison had this prolific, spectacular core. Like he had a good year, but Todd Centeio had been pretty much a mess at Temple and Colorado State. Maybe you just need to get away from Adazio. Maybe that was it. But I'm telling you what, definitely, I think James Madison last year won with, an okay quarterback, not a great quarterback. So that's all Jordan McLeod has to be, in my opinion. Be an okay quarterback. Don't make too many mistakes. And I still think it's a team that's going to have, some success this year. All right, Purdue, Virginia Tech. We've got in this game, Virginia Tech, 3-point favorites, 49.5 being the total. In this game, there's a lot of people souring on Purdue. Clearly, you lose at home as a favorite to Fresno State, who are not starting over a quarter. I got to be impressed. As much as I did not like what I saw to Mikey Keene at UCF, he played a pretty damn good game last week for Fresno against this Purdue team. So I give him all the credit for that. Absolutely a solid performance, but maybe it's an indictment of Purdue's defense. Just could not get off the field at all. Their head coach, by the way, is very, very young as well. Keep that in mind. So it's fascinating to see, can he keep this train on the tracks here with the Boilermakers and not undo all the terrific progress and work that Jeff Braun did with this Purdue program over the last few years. So that's something to keep in mind. But that was an inauspicious debut for Purdue last week against Fresno State. Again, defense was just absolutely carved up. We'll see. Like I said, Ryan Walters is a very, very young head coach here. We know they have Graham Harrell as the offensive coordinator, and we know they're definitely a team that's going to play with some pace. And once again, we saw that. The air raid up-tempo offense that Graham Harrell has, North Texas, USC, doesn't matter where he's been as an OC, that's what you get. And look, for all things considered, I don't think you can blame Hudson Card too much, the Texas transfer. He played well. They moved the football last week against Fresno. They just couldn't get stops when they needed it. We'll see if they can bounce back here. It's not going to be easy. You've got Virginia Tech, who was a team last year where anything good they did was defense. It wasn't necessarily offense. They did get the win 36-17 in their opener last week against Old Dominion. Keep in mind, they did struggle early in that game. It took them a while to really get going offensively, Virginia Tech, but eventually they did. My favorite quarterback finally got it going in the second half. I'm being facetious, of course, when I say that. Grant Wells. We've ripped this guy more than a few times here on the Hitting the Book show if you've been watching the last couple of years. But he did what I expected him to do. And like I said, that's why I laid the points with Virginia Tech. Old Dominion's kind of rebuilding, not one of the better group of 5 teams this year. And Virginia Tech should be able to shut him down defensively. And even Grant Wells can do enough offensively to lead that team to a productive outing on offense and a point spread cover. And that's what we saw in that game. I don't have much here. I think the move to Virginia Tech, like this, jumped up quickly to -3 because they were laying, I think, 1.5 when this line opened, up to 3. People souring on Purdue. This is definitely one I don't want to overreact to because Virginia Tech played a team I'm not high on, Old Dominion. Purdue played a Fresno State team that I thought this year could have some trouble trying to replace Jake Haener, but Mikey Keene played well. And Jeff Tedford, say what you will, he's a pretty damn good head coach. And we saw that, had his team ready to go in a tough spot on the road, early start at Purdue, and to find a way to get that victory was very impressive. but I don't want to overreact to it because I think there's things to like about Purdue offensively coming into this season. I think they should be able to put up points, but now you're going to play a Virginia Tech defense that I think has the potential to be a pretty damn good defensive football team this year, and doing so on the road. Let's see how they fare in this type of matchup for Purdue. So I think if the line creeps any higher, maybe I get a little interested in Purdue, but not enough at 3. I would like a little more than that. What do you think here, Conor? Purdue, Virginia Tech.
Yeah, Purdue at home. This is just, until its defense can change. We saw some of it last year, and they played to the over. And, man, that game was an easy over. And I look at this total, and unless they're going to change things around, we know Virginia Tech, not a high-flying offense, but, Old Dominion Fresno got that with Keene. You got to think even Grant Wells, we got to get, maybe get into the 30s here in this one. And you talked about Hudson Card was pretty good. So was the offense. It just wasn't great. They weren't efficient, and that ended up getting them in the game. They were a little bit sloppy in the end. Yeah, this is moved to 3. I don't love it. I think Virginia Tech could get the win. But man, I want to take this over. And obviously, Virginia Tech, you flip the other way, has been a pretty good under team, over last year. So, but at this number, I got to lean over here. Purdue, Virginia Tech.
All right, 49.5. It kind of feels low for a Purdue game, although Virginia Tech, we know, more so defense than offense last year especially, and maybe this year too. But you're right, for Purdue, 49.5. Pretty low total. And again, that defense was just chewed up last week by Fresno State in that 39-35 loss that they suffered. All right, next up, we've got obviously one of the games that's going to be talked about all week long as much as any, and a team that's being talked about as much, if not more than any. Deion Sanders, Colorado Buffaloes, who host the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Colorado, 3-point home favorites, 3.5 actually in some spots in their Boulder, Colorado, Folsom Field debut under the Deion Sanders regime. 59.5 the total in this game. So what the hell do you do with the power rating for Colorado? Clearly 3-touchdown underdog last week against TCU. People wondering if this, and say what you will, people either love Deion or hate Deion. But one thing you got to give this man credit for is you are somehow, with 52 new players on your complete 2-deep roster, 52 new faces, somehow you ended up getting this team to mesh and gel and come together in their first game, go on the road. And now people trying to downplay this victory because, TCU last year was a fake national championship team. They got lucky last year. That was still a damn good season and a damn good football team. And I think they're still I don't know about great team this year, TCU, but I still think they're a good team. And Colorado went there with all these new faces and beat them outright. As 3. Let's give the guys some credit. Let's give Deion some credit here. It was a fantastic job to get everything in place for them to play that well. Now, do they still have room for improvement? Of course they do. You can't expect to give up the big plays on defense and give up the points that you did against TCU and expect to win every week. They got to clean things up on that defensive side of the football. But what I saw a good game plan. I saw good adjustments throughout the game by the coaching staff that he put together. And I thought from the very beginning, Deion put together a great staff, because part of the success you have as a head coach, it's not only, game planning. It's not only recruiting the players, recruiting the talent. It's what kind of coaching staff can you put together? I've loved what I saw to Sean Lewis. And I said, I love the Sean Lewis hire as the offensive coordinator, who did a great job at Kent State. And they play extremely fast. You talk about breakneck pace. That's what we saw from Colorado. It was just, they got playmakers galore on the offensive side of the football. And so much talk about how bad they would be in the trenches, or at least struggle in the trenches early on. I think the defensive line got worn down later in that game in the heat, as we got into the fourth quarter, but I still thought they held up better than you would have thought. And I certainly think the O-line held up better than you would have thought. And a big part of that is they've got Dylan Edwards, the running back, was sensational. Jimmy Horn, Xavier Weaver, the just unreal performance we saw from Travis Hunter, playing over 100 snaps in the heat of Fort Worth at wide receiver and cornerback on both sides of the football combined. Spectacular. As I said on Twitter, Travis Hunter on Saturday against TCU, he's like the Shohei Ohtani of college football. finding a way to, play multiple positions, both sides of the ball, if you will, in baseball for Ohtani pitching and hitting. And for, Travis Hunter here, receiver and cornerback, defensive back, super impressive, especially all that time on the field, all those plays, over 100 snaps, incredible. And then, of course, the quarterback, the son of Deion Sanders, Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders was phenomenal. I mean, I saw him a little bit at Jackson State. I certainly saw the Celebration Bowl, and I saw some other games last year, just brief glimpses of him as a quarterback. But you always wonder, can it translate Power 5-wise? It translated. Man, was he ever sharp. Rolling out, making accurate throws, pinpoint accuracy, great decision-making, knowing when to run, knowing when, okay, I'm going to run, but I see a receiver open over the middle of the field. Bam, getting it to him with accuracy, with great touch. I mean, it was everything from Shedeur Sanders Saturday. He was terrific. I ain't stepping in front of Colorado, Connor. Let me put it that way. They impressed me that much. Obviously, people got the power rating and the point spread in week 1 completely wrong. But here's the concern now. I ain't fading Colorado this week. But is this the spot you want to be on them as well? That's the big question.
You want to lay 3 in a hook now?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you missed this.
And I'll say this too, Connor, about this game and this team. Bookmakers across the U.S. and offshore as well, like your DraftKings and your FanDuel, everywhere, global books, Vegas books, they got beaten upside the head with a 2x4 with this Colorado team last week. You can't say enough how much of the public loved Colorado plus the points. How many Colorado money line bets at that, plus 900 or whatever it was, price that Colorado was on the money line last week. And everybody just, the public was going crazy betting this team. Everybody was drinking the Deion hype, the Deion Kool-Aid, and buying the Deion Sanders Colorado hype. And they all got paid, and it was a disastrous result for sports books everywhere that not only Colorado covered in that game, but they won outright. So damn well, just from a handicapping and bookmaking 101 perspective, they are going to do their damnedest to jack up the power rating on Colorado to make sure they're not taken to the cleaners again by this Buffaloes team here this week, as far as the people piling on and betting the shit out of them like they did last week against TCU. So that's my one fear here. Odds makers are going to go, if there's one team in college football that odds makers are going to over adjust for this week, it's Colorado, because they got beaten up badly, brutalized by Colorado bettors last week against TCU. So, but I don't want Nebraska. I see them lose another game that they should have won last week against Minnesota. Jeff Sims, he had some good moments, but too many bad decisions, interceptions. It's a guy that, experience, but is it good experience from Georgia Tech? Too many mistakes. I'll say this, they wasted a completely outstanding effort from the defense last week against Minnesota. I thought they contained Kaliakmanis. He didn't impress me. They forced him into some errors. They did a great job getting off the field on third down, which is not something we've seen from Nebraska in years past. They do have a potential to have a pretty solid defense. And the fact is, there were some major question marks coming into the year for Nebraska on defense, but to see them play that well against Minnesota, and an absolute shame they lost that game with the way that defense played against the Golden Gophers. But something tells me, as good as that Nebraska defense looked last week against Minnesota, you're not shutting down this Colorado team, not to that extent. No way. And you're going to need to score points if you're going to have a chance to beat this Buffaloes team on the road. And you got to trust Jeff Sims, a receiving core that's okay, but not great. You talk about comparing playmakers and skill position talent, and you see speed difference with Colorado compared to a team like Nebraska. If you ask me, I do think Colorado's got a great chance to win and cover. But to me, this is not buying low on Colorado this week. After the kind of win they had, and after everybody and his brother pretty much bet Colorado last week in that game from a public bettor standpoint. So I'm off the game, but I think Colorado's that good, but I just don't want this. This is not the week I want to be on them. Not after what we saw last week. Everybody cashed their bets. Odds makers have gone above and beyond. This number was what? Colorado was what? More than a touchdown underdog before the TCU game? Colorado was more than a touchdown underdog in this game against Nebraska before the TCU result. And now they're laying 3.5. So that tells you all you need to know. Are you buying low on Colorado in this spot? I'm not so sure. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, and that's the odds makers doing the job, taking it 2-0 through the 3 now and having a hook on it, whether it's 4, it's bounced around 3, 3.5 most places. So they know what they're doing. So they're looking for a little bit of bait. Nebraska, let's hit them real quick. Sims had a few good, plays in that game like you talked about. His rushing yards he got over quick if you had that prop, but the 3 picks just was good. And we'll see about this Nebraska defense, because I didn't see Minnesota offense. I mean, that's old school, and we saw that was just a dead nuts under.
Really good
in that
Nebraska
game.
Defense or really bad Minnesota offense? You have to ask yourself that. Yep.
Yeah. So we'll see here with Colorado. In this one, Nebraska dealing with some injuries. One thing Nebraska has been good towards the end of last year is they're 4-1 against the number. And this is a team I never would take because they always would be laying points. But now they've been catching points as a dog, and they've been covering numbers as they did, even though they lost that game at a crazy end there in OT. And yeah, Colorado, what can you say? I mean, Sanders, 510 yards. You talked about the skill position. These guys, Hunter, Horn, Weaver, just huge days. I think there's points. It's just this total is pretty high. Colorado games just have been able to fly over. And Colorado's defense, I think, still has work to be done. I think they made some plays. And we talked about it last week, though, with TCU. They're just missing a lot as well. I have to give everything to Colorado, but they, missed a ton on defense. Half their guys, their offense. So they were a shell of a team that went to the national championship. I get it. I'm going to watch here, for as of right now. I don't have a bet in this game. Somebody put their team total. What's up, my guy, Mr. Eat? I don't know, because I don't know about Nebraska's defense. I do think Colorado can get there, so maybe that would be a look with Colorado's team total.
I would certainly prefer that look than maybe Colorado's side. I mean, the team total might be a decent look. I was all over the Colorado TCU game over the total. That's the only bet I had on the game last week was with Colorado TCU was the over, because I knew both teams would play fast. I had questions about both defenses, and I thought both offenses could do enough. And that certainly saw that in a 45-42 thriller. But when you look at this game, Colorado's going to play fast. Colorado's not a team I want to bet unders. But Nebraska, conversely, is like the antithesis, right? Going to slow it down. That's what they're doing this year under Matt Rule. Take time off the play clock, run heavy offense. That's what we're going to see. So you're going to have one team playing fast, the other not so much. And that's something you want to keep in mind here in this game. And you see it last week. There was 19, 26, 35, 37 rush attempts, 19 pass attempts for the Nebraska offense last week. So, it tells you all you need to know right there. They're going to be run heavy, run first. Say this, though, about Colorado. I talked about how the defensive front, concerning me, coming into this season. TCU and particularly Amani Bailey, was able to run for 164 rushing yards on 14 attempts. So that's clearly a work in progress for Colorado. Maybe Nebraska can run on Colorado a little bit here because, they're going to try to. And that is an area where I'm still concerned a little bit about Dion's Colorado team, that defensive front. They looked a little soft in the middle of that defensive line against TCU. We'll see if they can shore that up here. All right, next up, as we continue along, Utah and Baylor. This line has seen some movement. Utah opened a 6-point road favorite up to 7.5, 47.5 the total in this game. And this is another one where odds bettors early in the week, they are reacting to Utah beating the Florida Gators. Now, to me, Florida's not that good this season, but it's still a win against an SEC team without your starting quarterback, Cam Rising. You look very, very effective on both sides of the ball. Bryson Barnes, as I said on the show last week, it's not bothering me one bit that he's at quarterback. He's experienced. He's played a bunch. He's got a lot of pass attempts, and he was good enough. Was he great? No, but he was good enough. And that big bomb touchdown, first play of the game, set the tone for that entire game against Florida. The defense, I can't say it enough. Kyle Whittingham, man, just another wizardry coaching display. I mean, to have no Cam Rising, you had a bunch of injuries on defense. You had multiple D-line starters out. And here they are still whipping Florida in the line of scrimmage, getting after Graham Mertz in that game, stopping the run at a pretty effective clip. What a coaching job by Kyle Whittingham. All these factors, all these key pieces missing for you, playing a floor, at least a named Florida team, and you are able to overcome it and still get the win and cover. That's why we love Kyle Whittingham and why he's perennially, in my opinion, one of the best coaches in college football. But now you're laying above a touchdown on the road. We'll see if Cam Rising is able to be back here for this game. Utah, I know, was hopeful of that being the case. And he was on the sideline. He was moving around. He had the headset on in that game against Florida. So to me, it looked like a guy that had probably a good chance to return from injury for this game, but he is still day-to-day, and he is still questionable at the moment for that Baylor game this Saturday. And then we got to talk about Baylor. I've got no issues with Utah. They'll be fine. They are fine. Baylor is far from fine. Last year was a declining season under Dave Aranda. 2 years ago, they were great. Last week against Texas State, I actually thought Blake Shapen, who had some issues last year with consistency, he didn't play that bad against Texas State. It's not on him. It's on the defense. What has happened to a team defensively where Dave Aranda, that's his background? He got the coaching job because of a great defensive job he did as coordinator at LSU. That's how he got the Baylor job. And this defense can't stop anything right now. And it was a lot like last year. They had these issues where when they faced any sort of capable offense, they got shredded. But this is, to me, not necessarily
Texas State
offense. This is Texas State. Now, I know Texas State plays fast. I know they have TJ Finley, who is a guy that's played at LSU and Auburn, big-time SEC schools. And I think that is something we want to monitor. Before we go crazy downgrading the Baylor defense, let's evaluate how Texas State was able to somehow find a guy like TJ Finley and bring him in here to be their quarterback. Not a lot of schools in Texas State's position can do that. And they did. And he was very, very good. And ripped apart this Baylor defense. I was shocked. Could not believe it. Now, I had the over in the game. I thought Texas State would score a little bit, but I did not see that they would go up and down the field pretty much the entire football game against Baylor with ease, with absolute ease. And that now is a major, major worry for me with Baylor and that defense. To give up 42 points, to lose as a near 4 touchdown favorite in that game is just a brutal way to start the season. Like I said, TJ Finley had 298 passing yards through the air. They had success running the ball as well. But it was really the secondary where they just got absolutely shredded, this Baylor team. So if Rising comes back, that's trouble. And even if Bryson Barnes has to play again, man, that was a Swiss cheese sieve defense last week and showing more issues of the kind of team they were defensively last year at times for this Baylor team. So, I mean, I don't think I'm going to be involved in this because I also feel like, wow, this line's definitely higher than it would have been pre-Florida win for Utah and pre-Baylor loss against Texas State. You know, you're definitely seeing this number shoot up a lot. Because before, if you put this game before what we saw last week, you know, you're definitely looking at Utah, Baylor being maybe in a pick'em range or maybe Utah a slight road favorite, but nothing like -7.5 like they are right now. So a tricky game right now. I'd be fearful of just saying, you know what, value now is on Baylor, embarrassed for losing at home to Texas State, but that was so bad that even value alone is probably not going to get me to the betting window with the Baylor Bears here in this spot. Conor, what do you think? Utah, Baylor.
Yeah, I don't know if 7 is enough value, even here at home in Waco with this Baylor Bear team. The defense you mentioned, going back to last year, was just getting ripped. And even in some of their wins, they kind of got into shootouts. And this team was an over squad. This kind of a low total. Obviously, Utah's a very good defense. Even as good as they are, a little bit different on the road than at home. And we saw it last year. That is
true. There is a little home road thing going on with Utah, home road dichotomy. Yep.
Definitely. So can Baylor put up some points? I think the total's just a little bit too low here in this one. If that Baylor defense is just half, I mean, Utah should get 30. You know, I'm thinking because I watched, you know, basically half of that game, and you mentioned Finley, they couldn't do anything. And on the flip side, you know, Baylor had just a bunch of penalties. they looked all out of sorts. I think they had 9 penalties. Were a little bit sloppy. Shapen had a ton of yards. He did throw a pick. That was costly. So over the touchdown, I think still Utah tricky here. This is why week 2, little overreaction. We have these big changes in the numbers. I think they can go in there and win for everything I've seen. Probably cover the number, but I'm looking at the over here.
All right, Conor, looking at maybe some points here. I mean, what's alarming for the Baylor offensive line is allowing 3 sacks, last week to Texas State. That was a problem as well. Pass pro was a big issue for them. The O-line struggled. Even though they put up points, the O-line was giving up some negative plays. It's not going to get any easier now against Utah. My goodness, you talk about a team that is always just so damn staunch in the trenches, O-line and D-line.
That line's great. Yeah, both lines, but their D-line's very good.
I mean, you better shore that up and tighten that shit up pronto if you're Dave Aranda and Baylor, if you're going to have a hope to compete in this game, let alone win. All right, Oklahoma State, Arizona State. You've got Oklahoma State 3.5-point road favorites, 53 being the total here in this one. You talk about 2 teams that I've definitely got a little bit of a negative sentiment on, at least coming into this season. But at the end of the day, we're talking about Arizona State, Conor. They looked awful, I thought, against Southern Utah. You're talking about a 34.5-point favorite last week against Southern Utah, barely win the game straight up. 24-21 victory for Arizona State at home last week against Southern Utah. Where do you begin? Do you begin with the fact that, they had made all kinds of mistakes? They had some penalty issues. I thought their quarterback was okay, Jaden Rashada, 236 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. But the fact remains, I thought, defensively, things weren't necessarily great for them. They did, Southern Utah, have, special teams was a problem for Arizona State. Gave up a block punt return for a touchdown. You talk about those little things that may be, those other intangibles that aren't always factored into the point spread. Special teams, and Arizona State special teams was a disaster last week against Southern Utah. I laid it with Oklahoma State here on the road. I mean, I just think I'll trust Mike Gundy here in this kind of situation. I don't think he's got the talent in a lot of different areas compared to what we've seen in the past. But that was an alarming first game of the season for an Arizona State team that I already had the arrow pointing down on them. I'm not saying Kenny Dillingham can't do a great job here, the first-year head coach here with this Arizona State team. But, I definitely think it's going to be some growing pains. I think it's going to take some time. And Oklahoma State here, they were 3, they're up to 3.5. So we have seen a slight trickle of money on the Cowboys here. I feel like they're the lesser of 2 evils in this game, at least in my mind. And I did lay 3.5. I'd still endorse it here in this game. Now, the one thing that kind of concerns me is that last week, when you look at the game against Central Arkansas that they played, it is worth noting that they had all quarterbacks playing. They had Garrett Rangel playing for them. Oklahoma State played 3 quarterbacks in that game. Garrett Rangel, Alan Bowman, Gunnar Gundy, who of course is the son of Gundy. So sometimes what they say, when you play 3 quarterbacks in the game and you have 3 quarterbacks, sometimes you don't have any, which means as in you don't have any that you trust. So, I don't love the offensive situation necessarily for Oklahoma State, but I still like them here to still get the job done because I had no choice but to significantly downgrade Arizona State after that game last week against Southern Utah. That is not a team, Southern Utah, that you should be struggling to beat straight up as a 34.5-point favorite. But I saw bad defense. I saw bad special teams. I saw some penalties, turnovers. They were very sloppy at times with ball security as well. Arizona State in that game, not exactly a performance that makes me all that thrilled to be able to trust them here going into this game. But a lot of mistakes. Again, you're talking about a first-year coach as well in Dillingham against a guy that's been around the block, to say the least, in Mike Gundy. So I like Oklahoma State here. Short number. I think they can win the game and do it by enough of a margin to get the cover. What do you think here, Conor?
I want either of these teams. Both these teams going to the end of last year too. You talked about the quarterback carousel that was going on with Oklahoma State. They've been bad against the number. These teams just teams I don't want, ATS. I think Arizona's 1-5 the last 6, and Oklahoma State went on a bad run to end the year last year. Yeah, you know what struggled too was Oklahoma State. As bad as Arizona State did, I thought both these teams struggled against their opponent, Central Arkansas. Yeah, I mean, Central Arkansas moved the ball on them. It was just kind of tough for them to score. And I've talked about it the last couple of weeks. I hate the quarterback, 2-3 guys in. It kind of works in college, but I just don't love it. I kind of like this under. I thought this total was a little bit high. Oklahoma State was a decent under team last year, so I'm looking at the under 53.
All right, looking at the under. Next up, we move along. It is UCLA and San Diego State. UCLA double-digit road favorites here, 50 being the total in this game. When you look at UCLA and San Diego State, UCLA they got the job done. It wasn't pretty. Certainly wasn't pretty for their offense last week against Coastal Carolina. I think there's some issue. There's some worries here with UCLA offensively, I think, right now. Ethan Garbers, of course, quarterback, okay, not necessarily spectacular, though, in the win against Coastal last week. We'll see because they've got, Colin Schlee. Dante Moore actually got into that game for UCLA last week. I think long-term he's going to end up being the starting quarterback, quite honestly. I thought he impressed a little bit more than Ethan Garbers did for UCLA. So it's just a question of, how long is Chip Kelly going to go before he makes that final determination, who's actually going to be the guy at quarterback moving forward. San Diego State, we talked about how they kind of lucked their way into a victory against Ohio in their first game because Curtis Rourke got injured, didn't return, and kind of changed the complexion of that game. They survived. They hung on for a 20-13 win, and they were far from impressive. You talk about a 34-point favorite that barely won straight up. We talked about that with Arizona State just a minute ago. How about San Diego State? 34-point favorite against Idaho State last week. They end up winning the game 36-28. I'm not looking to bet back San Diego State. To me, the question is, can UCLA win by enough of a margin on the road here to get the job done? That offense clearly post DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, work in progress. I thought the defense actually played pretty solid for UCLA against, Grayson McCall, a fifth-year starter. Although I don't want to make too much of that because, to me, I think Tim Beck, who's the head coach of Coastal, I said this all summer, I'm worried that he's going to undo a lot of this great offensive creativity that Jamie Chadwell put together every year at Coastal Carolina. So I think there's still some questions about, how great of a performance that was from UCLA's defense. 48.5. So this is one of those where I might bet over just because of where the number is. It's 48.5, 49. It's a very low total for a UCLA team that we know is going to play up tempo, is going to play fast. I'm just hoping we see more Dante Moore because, like I said, I thought he was the more impressive of the quarterbacks in the game. Now it's funny, Colin Schlee, the Kent State transfer, was forgotten man. Chip Kelly ended up only playing Garbers and Moore. Schlee never saw a snap against Coastal last week. So the battle's ongoing. I don't know if San Diego State's defense is as good as it's been in the past. Let's be honest. They shut down Ohio because, look, Curtis Rourke left the game, and after that, Ohio was moving the ball against San Diego State before Curtis Rourke got injured. And on the flip side, San Diego State's trying to be more explosive offensively with Jalen Maiden. They're trying to throw the ball more. Ryan Lindley's made that a focal point all summer long in fall camp. We got to try to be a little more explosive, be a little bit more vertical. I know we've been a run-heavy, plodding offense for years here with the Aztecs, but we got to try to instill some sort of creativity into this offense. So we put those factors together. I'm making a small case for the over just because the number's low at 49. What do you think here, Connor?
We got to hit up our chat. Shout out to the chat. Lucas, Johnny K, Preston, Brian Watson, Wine Time. What's up, my dude? Jeffrey Moore, Mr. Heat, Joker, Coin, Steve G, Harold Williams, Mark L, Canes Nation. What up, my dude? JW, James S, everyone in your Kongs clips. Appreciate all you guys. Hit the like button. That's all we asked for. I thought this game was a little bit interesting, Babano. I don't think both these teams are pretty good. You talked about Coastal, had a fumble that he lost, 2 picks there. And on the flip side, UCLA had 2 or 3 interceptions, I believe. I think 3, right, by the 2 quarterbacks. So there could have been more points on the board in that game. And I was not impressed with UCLA. And on the flip side, I wasn't impressed with San Diego State. They did, like you talked about, beat Ohio. They just barely beat Idaho State. But I think they can move the ball a little bit, and I really want over 2 touchdowns here. I'd be on San Diego State because I'm just not impressed on the road. This UCLA team laying that, and I'm already right now like the 13.5. I'd just like to get 2 touchdowns, and yeah, maybe this total is just a little bit low. We talked about it with San Diego State a couple weeks. They started to go over. They're just a different football team than that stretch. Probably, I don't know, 8 years or so where they're under was just money with them. So yeah, I'm going to wait on the total, but UCLA on the road laying this, I am very interested in San Diego State.
All right, Wisconsin and Washington State next up on our menu here. We've got Wisconsin 6.5 point road favorites, 58.5 being the total in this game. I mean, you talk about something I got dead wrong this past weekend. It was Colorado State, who a team I thought would be a lot better this year. I didn't see it. I certainly didn't see it defensively in their first game against this Washington State team. But you got to give credit to the Cougars. Let's give them credit. Cameron Allen now. This is a guy that's in his second year now as the starting quarterback here with the Wazoo Cougars. And, man, I thought he played really well. He showed great ability, great explosiveness in their offense last week. Very, very impressed with the Wazoo offense, no question about that. Even with Colorado State obviously not playing well defensively, you're able to put up 50 points on the board. And Cameron Allen with 451 passing yards, 37 of 49, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Cameron Ward, I should say. Cameron Ward. I can think of Cameron Allen. Cameron Ward for Washington State. He played great at the quarterback spot. They had it was really a pass-heavy offense. That's something you want to keep in mind. They only had 90 rushing yards, so you don't want to be one-dimensional to that extent, every game. But Cameron Ward was very good for Washington State. And I thought Washington State's defense would kind of have some problems, and they didn't have too many problems with Colorado State's offense. They kept the Avery Morrow in check. Clay Millen, the quarterback, only 15 of 24, 110 yards through the air, no touchdowns, 1 interception. So he played a really, really solid – they played a really solid defensive game. Now, though, they play a Wisconsin team that, as we know, they're trying to be a little bit more of a pass-heavy offense this year. They're trying to throw the ball a bit more. And you look at last week's game for the Wisconsin Badgers, they were still pretty balanced. In fact, 13 rush attempts for Ches Malusi, Braylon Allen, 17 rushing attempts. So those two combined for 30 rush attempts. Tanner Mordecai at quarterback for Wisconsin had 31 pass attempts. But still, that is, even though they're 50-50 run pass this year, that's, they were a very, very heavily skewed to the run type of team the last few years. So they are throwing the ball more. They've got the quarterback to throw it that way right now. You are now going to, and you are seeing Wisconsin, they didn't go at a breakneck pace, but with Phil Longo there now as the OC, they are definitely cranking up at least the tempo a little bit more. You're going from basically a plodding, extremely slow offense to a slightly above average tempo. You're still going to notice the difference. And we saw that certainly from Wisconsin last week. We know Washington State, they're a pretty solid tempo team, explosiveness. I like the total more than anything here. I think we'll see points. You got both teams that are going to play with some pace, and I totally get why this total, 55 now up to 58.5. I like it. I'm telling you what, though, this is a tricky spot here for Wisconsin, right? You're at home against Buffalo. You got to fly now to Pullman, Washington, West Coast game with laying 6.5 here. It's a very, very dangerous offense. You talk about a team that might have backdoor potential in their games this year. Maybe that's Cam Ward and this Washington State offense. So I don't know if I'd feel overly comfortable, even though I think Wisconsin is certainly the better team. I don't know if I'm fully on board and fully comfortable with laying 6.5. I prefer the total over the 58.5 in this game. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, it's never easy to go to Pullman, Washington. Always not a good trip there. I remember this game last year. This is a little revenge. Washington State went to Wisconsin and beat them in a close one.
Yep.
What was it?
True. Good call.
17-14.
Yep.
So
In
Wisconsin
Madison. Yep.
in Madison wants a little revenge. Wisconsin, going through the box score real quick, had like a little over 400 yards, kind of dominated it, but had turnovers. Obviously, that was Mertz, quarterback. We have Mordecai here. Hey, he looked all right, but he had a couple picks. That will not work out. If he throws 2 picks, Washington is in this one. And, I think Ward's a solid college quarterback. I think the guy's pretty good. And at home, if this keeps creeping, as much as Wisconsin might get revenge, I think this one could be tough for them. I'd like to get over a touchdown, but I'm looking at Wazoo here.
All right, UNLV, Michigan. Next up, the second of the 3-game suspension for, of course, Jim Harbaugh. 36.5 point home favorites here, 56.5 the total. It's just it was a little over the top. Sorry, JJ McCarthy, but come on, a little over the top last week with the free Harbaugh sign on your jersey there. Come on, it's not like the guy's in Guantanamo Bay, in prison. Come on, it's a self-imposed ban. He'll be fine. He'll be all right. He's going to be okay. But nevertheless, Michigan, they didn't need Harbaugh. They still played pretty good last week against East Carolina. We'll see if they can carry that over here, which they should be able to. The question is, I'll tell you what, that Michigan defense, I actually thought Mason Garcia could, replacing Holton Ahlers, who was a multi-year starting quarterback there, not easy. I thought there'd be some better potential for East Carolina's offense last week than what we saw. But for Michigan to hold them to 3 points was a dominant defensive effort. I actually think this UNLV team, is going to be better this year. Am I ready to trust them here? Getting a big number. I will say this, East Carolina did cover last week. Michigan was 35.5 point favorites. East Carolina got the money. And I think UNLV is a little bit better coming into this season. I'm not saying they're going to be, all of a sudden, upper echelon of the Mountain West better. But, I think they've definitely got potential to make some improvement coming into this season. Barry Odom, I like the head coaching hire that they made UNLV this offseason. Arroyo, just didn't pan out with Arroyo here down the stretch. You still have some question marks about where they're going to go at quarterback. I mean, these are some guys that, they've had here for a long time with Cameron Friel and Jaden Maiava and Doug Brumfield. They've been here forever, it seems, at UNLV. I'm telling you what, Michigan, we saw definite evidence last week, Connor, when that team got up by that big margin in the third quarter. It was kind of park the bus and get the game over with. And I wasn't so sure that was going to be the case. I thought even without Harbaugh on the sideline, we've seen Michigan show the propensity to punch in those late touchdowns when they're already up by such a huge margin. We didn't really see that last week. They were taking their foot off the gas pedal. So I'd be careful here with laying 36.5. I don't know if I'll take UNLV, but I'd take the points before I lay this many with Michigan. I'll tell you that. And if you like Michigan, my advice to you would be take them first half, because we definitely saw them really ease up in the second half with that commanding lead. What do you think here, Connor? UNLV, Michigan.
Yeah, I agree. If you like Michigan, I think you look to them early. Can UNLV score? Because that was, like you talked about, East Carolina. They didn't get a touchdown, 3 points. And that Michigan defense looked pretty good. Man, to go there, this could be rough for UNLV. Like, I was just trying to think, can they get over their team total? Which I'd have to look up. It's got to be maybe 10. I don't even know. East Carolina was 6.5.
You can't cover 36.5 if you only score 30. Remember that?
Yeah, no, it's true. UNLV's defense, that's what I want to get to. Because last year, at times, Babano got shredded. Bryant scored their touchdowns in the second half. The second, third stringers were already in that. UNLV covered that game easy. And Brumfield's the guy. He's the best guy as long as he can stay healthy. I just don't know if he can do anything in this game. So, yeah, this is one that I'll be watching. I think if you like Michigan, maybe take them early. I'm just questioning if UNLV can score here.
That is going to be that's going to be the key to whether UNLV. I think UNLV punches in one touchdown. They're probably going to cover, to be quite honest with you. But will they be able to do that on the road in the big house is going to be the big question. for this one. All right, Texas A&M and Miami next up. A really good one. Rematch of last year. These two teams also met in a non-conference game. We've got Texas A&M, 4.5-point favorites here on the road at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. Total in the 49 range pretty much across the board. We have ourselves, a situation where A&M 17-9 winners last year in the game over Miami. We'll see if Miami has redemption and revenge on their minds this year. I'm not so sure what to make of Miami. I thought Miami would compete better than that, but I will give the Hurricanes credit. 38-3 beat down over the Redhawks last week. They racked up 250 rushing yards in the victory over the Redhawks last week. Henry Parrish Jr., Mark Fletcher, very, very good production. Donald Chaney, and of course Tyler Van Dyke, effective. 201 passing yards. It's not like he had to put up big yardage numbers, but he was solid for Miami with the passing game. We'll see if they're able to carry that over. I mean, it was a very impressive performance against a team that I thought would be one of the better, certainly, defenses in the MAC. Can they duplicate that here? I laid the points with Texas A&M last week against New Mexico, 52-10. Like I said, it's one game, and it's a very, very bad New Mexico team. There's no question about that. But I like Conor Wegman. I really do. I think this guy might be the best quarterback A&M's had in a few years. I really think there's potential. I mean, I like what I see. Good poise, much better accuracy and touch with the football, I think, than we've seen from, so many different quarterbacks that have rolled through A&M the last few years. 18 for 23, 236, 5 touchdown passes in that game. But obviously this is going to be a much taller order. You're playing a pretty good, at least a potential to be a solid Miami team this year. It'll be a bigger test. You're on the road, better team, better defense. We'll see how he fares here in this game. They're betting Miami. People bet what they saw last, and what they saw last was Miami looked 38-3 at home against the Miami, Ohio Redhawks. Keep in mind, Brett Gabbert really sewered his team in that game too with the stupid comments he made. We're the real Miami. Before. Like, he just gave them bulletin board material. You can't be doing that shit. You're outmanned as it is. You're already in tough. You're 17-point dogs going into that game. You can't feed the beast and give them that kind of ammunition to really want to beat the tar out of you. And that's exactly what Brett Gabbert did with those comments. So Miami obviously heard those and lay a pretty solid, convincing win. And I was impressed with Miami. I was. But the more they bet Miami, the more I want to look the other way. Because I do think I like A&M more. I like my A&M more than Miami is for improving coming into this season. And if they keep betting this thing down, I'll be going on the other side with the Aggies. What do you think here, Connor?
This is one too. There wasn't a ton of games. There could be some rain, a little bit of wind too in this one, but just keep a watch on that. You talked, the rematch a little bit last year. That was frustrating if you had Miami. They kind of dominated that game and lost 17-9. Couldn't get a touchdown. Like, time of possession, they got that yard, all this stuff, and they couldn't punch it in. And they missed 2 field goals. They went 3 or 5. A&M, you talked about Conor Wegman. It's early. I get a little bit of the hype that he looks solid in this one. And Van Dyke. The good, the bad with Van Dyke. It was Miami, Ohio. He looked pretty good. Let's see it do it here. Man, A&M's been good. 6-0 against the number against ACC teams. Man, I wish I was catching a little bit more here with Miami. I'd look their way. But right now, I think this is the game I'm going to watch.
All right, Battle of Iowa now. What do they call it? The Cyhawk rivalry here. Iowa State. They play each other every year in the month of September, non-conference. And here we go again with these two. Iowa 4-point road favorites in Ames. And here we go again with the total with these two teams. It's always in the 30s. And we see it once again here, 36 with Iowa and Iowa State here. I'll tell you what, if you're Iowa, I'm not too enamored with my performance last week against Utah State, who I don't think are going to be particularly good this season. And there's Utah State hanging around, and they were never, threatened to not cover that point spread last week, Utah State against Iowa. And again, with Iowa so many times is, can we trust this offense to be explosive enough to win games and cover numbers, especially as chalk, as favorites? And last week we didn't see it. 24-point favorite against Utah State. Well, guess how many points they scored? 24. And that tells you all you need to know. Now, I will say this, in fairness to the Iowa offense, I still liked certainly more of what I saw from Cade McNamara compared to, Spencer Petras and some of these real anemic options they've had at quarterback in the past year, the Hawkeyes. But still a work in progress. Still, there were too many points left on the table, not able to finish drives consistently. What's also very interesting is that Caleb Johnson running the football for Iowa last week against a team they should have been able to just run the football down their throat. 63 yards on 19 rush attempts, 3.3 yards per carry. That's not what you want to see when you're facing what should have been an overmatched defensive front for Utah State. So I got issues with trusting Iowa laying 4 on the road in a spot like this. Iowa State, obviously, we know what's been going on there. The betting scandal is why Hunter Decker's unavailable for them at quarterback this season because of that whole incident. And it looks like Rocco Becht got the start last week for them against Northern Iowa. And I thought Iowa State was certainly vulnerable. And I was part of that flock of bettors that took Northern Iowa and absolutely paid the price for it, as Iowa State ended up winning that game very comfortably by a score of 30-9 last week over Northern Iowa, when a lot of the money came in on Northern Iowa in that game. Becht was solid, 10 of 13. 113 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns. It was a decent performance overall from this Iowa State Cyclones team. But now you're taking a big step up in defensive class against a team like Iowa. See if Rocco Becht and the offense is able to have that same kind of success. I'm not going to fib anybody into thinking that I have a strong or any kind of opinion on this game. I don't have a bet on the side. I don't have a bet on the total right now. And I'm pretty sure I won't have one before kickoff on Saturday. Conor, what do you think here? Iowa State.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to get involved in here either. Yeah, Iowa, that was one I just kind of kicked myself. Utah, just the points, the under just was easy, kind of cruise. McNamara was okay. I think the defense should get better. This team's dealt with some stuff off the field, like you talked about, and some injuries. This is always a good rivalry. Iowa State won the game last year, remember, 10-7. So, but I don't even know if Iowa should be leaning 4 in this game. I mean, maybe they are a little bit better. Yeah, we haven't seen enough out of Rocco, like we talked about. I don't know what we see. I got to see a little bit more from Rocco. We're obviously going to have slow play. That's why this totals 36. You total that low, dogfight, free bet, I take the points. But in the end, I don't think I'm going to get involved too. But I'll wait on this.
All right, SMU and Oklahoma. We've got Oklahoma 16.5-point home favorite, 68.5 being the total in this game. Total's actually dropped a little bit, 70 down to 68. There's no doubt in my mind Oklahoma's defense is better this year. Question is how much better, and question is how much do you make of them, putting the clamp down on Arkansas State, who to me is probably going to be one of the worst group of 5 teams in college football this year. I think that they could be that bad for Arkansas State, in my opinion, this year. I don't want to dismiss what Oklahoma did because, like I said, I just think with a coach like Brent Venables and the ability of what they're able to recruit, you're going to see that defense improve. But at the end of the day, you faced an offense that's just not that good, and a team that's just not that good. But still, to have a 73-0 shutout is and anytime you shut someone out, you got to give them some sort of credit for it. Again, only 148 passing yards from JT Shrout for Arkansas State, and they could not run the ball. 48 yards rushing for Arkansas State on 23 carries. That's barely 2 yards per carry. So just absolutely a clinic defensively. But you go from playing them to now playing SMU, who have a very dynamic, very explosive offense, who have a very solid quarterback in Preston Stone, which is why they're not going to, shed too many tears about losing Tanner Mordecai in the transfer portal of Wisconsin because, Preston Stone's a very capable quarterback. And I think SMU's defense showed a little something last week against Hank Bachmeier and the Louisiana Tech Bulldogs. Bachmeier struggled. They had no run game to speak of. Louisiana Tech, SMU played pretty solid on that side of the football. We'll see if they can carry that over here to this game against Oklahoma. But I liked what I saw from SMU's defense, a defense that last year was kind of their stumbling block. They put up the big points under Rhett Lashley last year, and the defense just could not get enough stops and weren't good enough on that side of the football. I definitely think there's two teams that are better defensively, potentially a lot better defensively than they were last year. So this is one of those totals where I know they're going to play fast, SMU, and they throw the ball a lot. And Oklahoma is going to play fast on offense. We know Dylan Gabriel and that offense could be really electric this year. And we saw what they did, 73 points on the board against Arkansas State last week. But I know, and like I said, I know they're going to play fast on offense, but I kind of understand why people took under 70 when this opened, thinking maybe these two defenses are a lot better. And if that's the case, it still might be asking a lot to see this many points scored in this game on Saturday. As far as the side goes, I have to lean SMU with this kind of number because they're amped up for a game like this. I've got to see Oklahoma do it against a team, not Arkansas State, who I think is going to be bottom tier Sun Belt team, bottom tier group of 5 team. I got to see it against someone competent, and SMU is more than competent. SMU could win the AAC this year. That's how much I think of SMU this football season. So SMU plus the points. I haven't bet it yet. We'll see where the number goes, but I'd lean that way, even though Oklahoma was remarkably impressive and dominant last week. You have to factor in who they played in that dominance as well. What do you think here, Connor? SMU, Oklahoma.
Yeah, that's what we get here in week 2, because I got to give credit to SMU, but I think Louisiana Tech, there's problems there as well. Issues, but they did look better defensively. Stone looked good against a Tech D that's not great. He had 3 touchdowns, no picks. And can this SMU defense come to play against Oklahoma? And this is a problem with Oklahoma. The 73-0 win, it's just like lay it with them. The struggles of them laying these numbers, and I know it was a cakewalk, has been trouble the last 5 years or more. Because I'd like to say lay it here with Oklahoma, but I don't have the trust. So, but I don't know if I want SMU. I got to dig a little bit deeper in this game. Check the money, some other stuff before I make a move, maybe.
All right, Troy and Kansas State next up on our games list here. 16.5-point home favorites. Kansas State 50.5 being the total here in this one. Very interesting to see what we get from both Kansas State and Troy this year. Troy last year, excellent defense, really, really labored to put points on the board at times. We'll see if things change this year. I know against Stephen F. Austin, no problem offensively for Troy. They put up 48-30 win, but didn't cover as 26.5-point favorites. It is worth noting in that game against Stephen F. Austin. K-State rolled past Southeast Missouri State 45-0 in their first game last week. Will Howard is back at quarterback for Kansas State. He's now full of experience. I expect a very good season from him because he's been here a while. He's gotten progressively better since he's been under Chris Kleiman's watch here at Kansas State, and definitely a good first game. We'll see how he fares here against this Troy team that, defensively was very, very stout last year, no question. But also a defense that, showed some holes in that Stephen F. Austin game. Even though they won 48-30, they gave up some points. So I think Kansas State, deserving to be double-digit favorite. Do I want to lay this many? I'm not so sure. It's a pass for me right now, but I worry about Troy a little bit here. Because at this stage, when you look at the double-digit dog, you would always say, well, I want the dog that's going to get some stops for me on defense if I'm going to bet a double-digit underdog. To me, I kind of think the opposite now. I want the double-digit dog that if they're down by 21 late in the game, they're going to score some points for me. They're going to punch in some touchdowns.
Especially on the road, real quick.
Yeah.
On the road, that's even better.
100%. And I'm still not sure about this Troy offense to be able to do that. Like, to me, they're still one of those teams. If they're going to be behind by 21 points in this game, I don't have the faith in them on the road against a very good Kansas State defense to be able to punch in that late touchdown for me. Because that's on Gunnar Watson. You talk about this guy's been here forever for Troy at quarterback. yeah, you put him up against a good defense, especially on the road. I've seen that guy just do absolutely nothing offensively for the Troy Trojans. And that's my worry here, because I think Kansas State is pretty damn good defensively this year. They've got the experienced quarterback. And we've also seen Kansas State in these non-conference spots at home just rip it up over teams. So this is one where I lean favorite before I lean underdog, although it's a lot of points. What do you think here, Connor?
It is. It seems like you talked about too. K-State, either it's just a blowout or this game could be real tight. But I have a tough time. If Stephen F. Austin put 30 points like you talked about, I worry here with Troy. This could be a blowout. And this is a lot of points where I think you could go, and it's tough to say because it's so early in the year. Because I like to maybe look at them first half, in Kansas State. Or maybe this one, they grind it out and really, pull away late. But I was kind of leaning them first half. I think they can jump on Troy. They have the better defense. You talked about Howard, good running back, Giddens. And I don't know how much Gunnar Watson, he had 48 points on Stephen F. Austin. We'll see what he can do against K-State. So I lean the favorite in this game.
All right, there we go. Both of us, at least lukewarm, lean here to Kansas State in this game. And like I said, I really do think Will Howard, got that potential to have a very, very good season here for Kansas State at the quarterback spot. Like I say, he's been around. And this is a guy that I remember watching him in the very beginning of his career at K-State, his first start. And I'm like, man, this guy's not very good. But he has gotten better and better and better and better and better. There's no question about that during his tenure with K-State. And now he's the undisputed starter. And definitely, I think you're going to continue to see growth in him.
I don't have totals right now. But, yeah, someone just put Markel, the K-State team total. I don't have that, up.
Team totals are not always posted early in the week. But if you want to estimate what you're going to get here from, you're looking at probably a 34.5 with the team total. Something.
Yeah, I was going to say 34, 35. Yeah, you could just break it down with the numbers. Some places already have it now, not a lot though. You're right. We won't have them for a couple of days.
Yeah, it'll definitely be more than 31. It'll probably be closer to 34, 35 with that Kansas State team total in this game. All right, let's go to what should be a really good non-conference game here coming up. Ole Miss and Tulane. Yeah. We've got Ole Miss currently 7.5-point road favorites. At Yulman Stadium, home of the Green Wave, total 65. I mean, I knew Tulane had a great year last year, and I was on board with it. I know you had a lot of Tulane winners last year as well. I thought, though, there was some questions about, some of the lost production for Tulane on both sides of the ball, just a little bit. There was some concerns, like they lost some key pieces from last year. But man, it didn't show up last week against South Alabama. That was a very, very big statement made by Willie Fritz's Tulane squad. And I said, you know what? Shame on me. This team was just such a meal ticket last year for yours truly, and many of us that were on them. And that I said, I'm a little concerned. And I liked South Alabama a lot coming into this year, and they were catching a healthy number. And I'm like, I'm not betting against this Tulane team now for the foreseeable future after that. Last week. Now becomes the question. I think they can hang in this game. I really do. We've seen Tulane. We saw what they did against USC in the bowl game last year, toe-to-toe with a Power 5 team. Now they get them at home. Like Ole Miss is actually going to Tulane for this game. Michael Pratt is sensational. And the thing that sometimes he would do is sometimes he would run with the football, and after his first or second read isn't there, he would end up, taken off, not going through his progressions more. I find that first game, he's grown even more as a quarterback. He could have a spectacular season. That was what was supposed to be a pretty solid South Alabama Jaguars defense that Michael Pratt and the Tulane offense had. And remember, Tajay Spears ain't there anymore. And he was such a huge part of that offense last year from the running back spot. But 37 points on the board, 294 through the air for Michael Pratt. They were able to get good enough contributions running the ball from Mekhi Hughes in that game, but that passing game was on point. Absolutely terrific. Jaquan Jackson was outstanding. Lawrence Keys, Chris Brazel. Lots of weapons still for this Tulane team. Now, what do we make of Ole Miss coming into this season? They, in their first game, had a rout over Mercer, 73-7. Obviously very impressive. I think defensively, you're going to see this Ole Miss team be solid. Jackson Dart, actually, it's funny because you saw Walker Howard, Spencer Sanders, and Jackson Dart all get playing time, largely because of the fact it was a blowout. But it sure seemed like Jackson Dart was going to be the guy to be the quarterback to start the season at the very least for Ole Miss. And I expect him to be in there to begin this game here against Tulane. Should be a fun game. I'm looking forward to this. It's a question of how far along has that Ole Miss defense come from last year to this year. As you look at some of those results last year, CMAC, I mean, 34 points allowed to Auburn, 30 points to Bama, 42 to Arkansas, 42 to Texas Tech in the bowl game. I mean, they had some really rough defensive numbers last year, Ole Miss. Yeah. I definitely think they're better this year, no question on that side of the football. But again, it's all relative. You're facing again a Tulane team that has explosiveness offensively, a Tulane team that has shown the ability to score points and their offense to work and function at a high level against a Power 5 school, like we saw in the bowl game against a USC last year. I think there's enough in this Tulane team to make this an ultra competitive game. I like this home dog a little bit, especially now that it's 7.5 across the board. What do you think here, Conor? Ole Miss, Tulane.
Yeah, Tulane. Let's just get to it. You talked about, man, they just dominated. You talked about Pratt was unreal. I came out like, 14 to 15, something like that. 4 TDs. Defense, a little bit last year that could give it up, but did it there. Made some plays, bend but didn't break. Against a pretty good South Alabama team that I think still going to be all right. Carter had a few picks that were big in that game. You mentioned it, Tulane. Whether to go back to last year, they beat up SMU. Bad. They beat up Cincinnati, beat UCF bad, and then beat SC in that thriller. Ole Miss.
He's getting talent here at Willie Fritz at Tulane. That's the important thing to point out. They got players, they got playmakers, they got speed, they've got athletes now. And you never said that years ago. Certainly when Curtis Johnson was there. Remember, it was a disaster, Tulane.
Yeah, and I think they're going to score here. As good, as talented as Ole Miss is, they're going to score on them. And I think Ole Miss will get theirs. This total's moving up. I agree. I think we see fireworks in this game. And I think Yeoman Stadium is going to be popping crazy, Babano, for this, and I got to be on Tulane here with the points.
Yeah, I would agree with you with the total. It's going up for a reason. I mean, I do think Ole Miss's defense is better, but you're going from playing pretty much nobody, Mercer, to I think one of the best group of 5 offenses this could be in the country in terms of group of 5 teams, Tulane. That is how good their offense could be. And Tulane defensively, it's going to be night and day for them too. South Alabama's more of a pedestrian offense, decent but not explosive on that side of the football. And Ole Miss does have that explosive potential with their offense this year. And Jackson Dart, look, it was Mercer, but Jackson Dart looked really good in that game. Obviously, that's going to be put to the test here. We'll see how he fares in this one. Next up, we've got Oregon, Texas Tech, another very intriguing game here. Oregon, 6.5, 7-point road favorites now in Lubbock, 67 the total in this game. This one's starting to creep into overreaction territory. And I know Texas Tech, bad loss, tough loss, whatever you want to call it, at Wyoming. But that's never an easy place to play. They had the lightning delay, so the game got going late. That didn't help things. But to me, and look, Oregon just scored at will against Portland State in their opener against that FCS squad. But I'd pump the brakes here. Oregon now on the road. It's travel from the Pacific Northwest down to Texas, where it's probably going to be hot, like it normally is at this time of year. And I believe it's a afternoon game, if I'm not. No, it's a night game, but still it's going to be pretty hot, 6 p.m. local time here in Lubbock. And I'm not totally souring on Texas Tech yet. And then there's that little, I don't want to make a big deal of it, the revenge factor and revenge angles in this, but Tyler Shuck's playing against his former team, Tyler Shuck was initially with Oregon, and now here he is with Texas Tech. And you don't think he's going to be amped up to try to play a terrific football game here against this Ducks team? There's no question he will. Now, can Texas Tech, shut down or at least neutralize Bo Nix and the Oregon offense? That's going to be the big question. Now, again, last week, spectacular, and there's no question Oregon offensively is just a beast to deal with. There's no doubt, and we saw it last year. We see this year again. There's playmakers galore at their disposal on the offensive side of the football. When you talk about Bucky Irving at running back, you got Troy Franklin, Tez Johnson at wide receiver. Tons of weapons here. The O-line's pretty solid. The defense last year for Oregon, when we know this has been a team that at times defensively has had their struggles, but they definitely, showed improvement last year defensively, albeit, the final game of their regular season against Oregon State didn't go well. But now that defense is going to have to play a Texas Tech offense that I think can be dangerous. Even though, like I said, didn't look great last week, but that Wyoming team, I don't think they get the credit. It doesn't matter, it seems, who they play. Wyoming at home, just their defense somehow just shows up, keeps the clamps down, keeps them into the game. This is definitely one where I'm not on board with the overreaction here a little bit toward Oregon and the overreaction to Texas Tech losing in overtime last week against Wyoming. Now, there's always that thought. You have a loss like that. Is it going to be a hangover for Texas Tech? No, you got to get back in the saddle here. You haven't even gotten into Big 12 conference play yet. There's still so much that you can at your disposal here the rest of the season. So I'm certainly leaning Texas Tech. I'm not willing to lay 7 on the road with Oregon, even with the possibility of how explosive and dynamic this offense for Oregon could be. What do you think here, Conor? Oregon, Texas Tech.
Yeah, the numbers starting to stretch out here. You mentioned it was. By Saturday, I wanted Wyoming. I couldn't get over the 2 touchdowns. It didn't matter, but because we talk about it, I was a little bit worried how Wyoming plays kind of early, first game of the year. That's the only thing that was going, because them at home at Laramie, I won my money on them because I didn't know how the offense would perform. And both defenses kind of gave it up, in that game. They were able. The big thing that I didn't love was Wyoming ran it all over Texas Tech. I mean, just they knew they were going to do that and just shoved it down their throat. So Oregon probably does that here, but now they're favorites, like you talked about. Not an easy place to play in Lubbock, and usually this is just a little bit overreaction. As soon as we catch points, Texas Tech at home, you mentioned Shuck, his former team. And Oregon on the flip side, Bo Nix, good old Bo Nix forever, 7th or whatever season going on. And Oregon has some great playmakers. I think it's a pretty good game. And I just don't know if I get involved betting it.
It is worth noting. I knew I wanted to go back and look this up. The numbers as an underdog here for Texas Tech. 11-point dog at Oklahoma State covered. Not a 10-point dog at TCU was a push. 3.5-point dog at Iowa State, they won. 1.5-point dog Oklahoma, they won. 4.5-point dog in the bowl game against Ole Miss, they won. I mean, that's historically, especially under Joey McGuire here, this current head coach for Texas Tech, been a pretty good underdog bet. Texas Tech. So that's another thing that kind of I tick the check mark or tick the box on Texas Tech in this game.
Those are great numbers you ripped off, and it's just different. I talk about like Pullman going to Laramie and your 2 touchdown favorites. Even though it's the first game of the year, you should be up for it. It's kind of a sleepy spot, and then to come back home now and catch points.
That was an exhausting game, and it was a very long night because there was the lightning delay. It went to overtime. It wasn't over until almost 1 a.m. Eastern time. That is definitely a concern I have, though, for Texas Tech is, it was a really, really long night. Can you get things back and ready to go your full practice week and have that energy be up at a high level for this matchup here against Oregon? All right, Arizona, Mississippi State. We've got Mississippi State 10.5-point home favorites here, 60 the total. These two teams actually played each other last year in non-conference play, and it was 39-17 Mississippi State. I laid the points with the Bulldogs in that game. They outgained Arizona 426-316, and I was very comfortable with taking Mississippi State in that game. I am not comfortable taking Mississippi State here in this game, even though Arizona is traveling to Starkville. Last year's game was in Tucson. Now they go to Starkville, Mississippi this year for the rematch. I don't like what I'm seeing post the unfortunate, sad passing of Mike Leach of course, the legendary college football head coach, and obviously did a great job here. Mississippi State threw everyone for a loop when he passed away suddenly last year. I don't like what they're doing at all. It's almost like, okay, Mike Leach, and I'm not trying to be harsh here, but it's almost like, okay, Mike Leach is gone. Let's shovel some dirt on the grave and let's undo everything he did, because they're not doing air raid anymore. They're totally changing the scheme on offense. And I don't get it. I don't get it, because the guy they've got at quarterback is the guy that has run that air raid style of Mike Leach's here at Mississippi State very well, in Will Rogers, who of course is back at the quarterback spot. I don't understand why they're doing this. Like, I get it. You know, everybody, the coaching staff now, it's different. You can do what you want. You can change things if you want to. But I don't know if I would have gone to that if I'm Zach Arnett, the first-year head coach, and Kevin Barbay, who's the first-year offensive coordinator here with Mississippi State, because that offense was just perfectly suited to Will Rogers. And Will Rogers had really gotten comfortable running that air raid. And now you're changing it up. And I don't know if that's necessarily something that's going to work out and be swimmingly a fluid transition for Mississippi State moving forward. So this is definitely something I'm monitoring, not only in this game, but moving forward. Of course, Arizona brings back Jaden DeLaura at quarterback for another season. And keep in mind, last year, Arizona, in the where they were as a program, you know, they were much lower. They weren't as far along in their rebuild, Arizona, last year as they are now. You know, they're starting to build some things here, Arizona. DeLaura at quarterback. You know, the defense, I think it was terrible last year. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but, you know, I definitely think there's room for improvement on that side of the football for Arizona. I'm taking the double digits with the Wildcats here. I'm going to maybe even let this line climb a little bit more, but I bet Mississippi State under their win total. I think I don't like what I'm seeing here with these changes on offense, and whether that's going to be the great fit for Will Rogers. You know, on the defensive side of the football, we'll see. But I'm not loving, you know, the direction they're going post Mike Leach here at Mississippi State. And I have my doubts that they can cover this margin here in their first game, I should say, against FBS competition. But definitely I'm looking at Arizona plus the points. Connor, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that was a lot of talk with him going. They're kind of down on this team. They took a lot of under with their team total, Mississippi State, you know, before the year started. You know, they beat up on Southeast Louisiana pretty good, obviously. They are at home. I always like them at Starkville, but I do think the number might just be a little bit too big, even though I do think they can win here. Basically, the only key that I really like is Rogers. You know, I know the offense has changed, but he is there. So that is what I like. Flip side with Arizona, Jaden DeLaura, I thought they were going to roll on Northern Arizona. You know, they basically did. Northern Arizona only had a field goal in that game. But is Arizona's defense really better? Because this team is gashed, you know, at times last year. And even a couple years back, we're way down at the bottom. So, yeah, I mean, they might be able to score. It's not an easy travel spot for Arizona. You know, they, like I mentioned, DeLaura, they have Wiley's a pretty good running back. They should be able to put some points up. This one was tough for me. I think Mississippi State wins, but maybe they don't cover in the end.
All right, Appalachian State, North Carolina here. North Kakalaki, 18-point home favorites, 58 the total in this game. I had to upgrade North Carolina after last week. I was extremely impressed. Very, very impressed with North Carolina. And look, I know the offense, nobody's surprised. I mean, we knew they were going to be really good offensive team with Drake May leading them at quarterback. What I was impressed with was the defense, man. I saw stopping the run. I saw blowing up the line of scrimmage over and over again in the win against South Carolina. And maybe that speaks volumes about South Carolina's offensive line, too.
That line.
It's not good at all.
That was awful.
Yeah. North Carolina is definitely, to me, I've still got to upgrade their defense after what I saw. It was much better than anything we saw out of North Carolina's defense last year. And it doesn't take a lot to be better than anything we saw out of North Carolina's defense last year, but I definitely have to give them credit. That was a much better defensive effort in that commanding victory over South Carolina last week. On the flip side here, we've got Appalachian State, who, of course, if you look at it here, you've got the guy that was expected to be their starting quarterback this year, Ryan Berger. He's going to be out 3 to 4 weeks. Hand injury suffered for App State at the quarterback position last week. So keep that in mind, which means we're probably going to end up seeing Joey Aguilar as the starting quarterback here for App State in this game against North Carolina. We'll see how he fares here. But you talk about someone that last week, albeit he entered the game, he played pretty well for App State. Let's give Aguilar credit. 11 of 13, only 2 incomplete passes, 84% completions, 174 pass yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. I got to say, that's pretty good numbers, entering that game for an injured quarterback. But you also have to factor in now what happened last week in terms of the opponent. It was Gardner-Webb. And you're going to be facing someone a lot tougher here in this game, taking on North Carolina, what looks like an improved defense. So we'll see. I know they're betting the hell out of North Carolina, and I get it. They looked extremely impressive last week. You are still talking about, 2 teams where it's a rivalry situation. We're talking about a 63-61 game between these 2 teams last year, where North Carolina escaped with the victory, where they gave up 649 total yards of offense to App State, and then 34-31 App State when these 2 teams played each other in 2019. So the 2 head-to-head meetings with these schools in the last 4 years were very competitive, down-to-the-wire games. For as much as North Carolina impressed me last week, and for as much as I've upgraded them after that performance, especially on the defensive side of the football, in this series, I'm not ready to lay 18, and I won't be laying 18 with North Carolina. Not sure I'll get there with App State, knowing they got Aguilar, the QB2, in there as the starter. I'm not so sure, but I wouldn't be laying this many with North Carolina, even though they looked good last week. What do you think here, Conor?
Yeah, some question marks. You mentioned Aguilar. What does he do here? One thing, South Carolina, as bad as the line was and the sacks, Rattler was able to throw it. They couldn't run it. Can App State, which is always likes to run the ball, Can Noel and Hayward, these guys run the football on North Carolina. I want to see that. You mentioned they've been competitive. I'd be a little bit leery of just jumping all over North Carolina and laying the points in this game. Yeah, I don't know about how crazy it gets like it did last year. 63-61. We should still see some points. I mean, App State did go up just 24 to Gardner-Webb. Gardner-Webb football, I don't think there's much talk going around about their high-powered offense. So I'd lean over.
And keep in mind, App State defensively had their issues at times last year. You're right. Giving up 24 points against Gardner-Webb is not what you want to see when you're about to play this high-powered North Carolina offense led by Drake May. So you're right. It's a lot of points and I don't feel comfortable laying 18 in this series, but I'll make it crystal clear. This is not one of those spots where I'm rushing to bet App State either.
Yeah, on the other side, because North Carolina, this App State team just has a little bit more questions than the last few years where we knew they were a little bit better. Because if they get down early, it could be tough. And I want to see the defense more for North Carolina. I got to see more. I can't just go off that game.
UCF and Boise State, another intriguing. We've got so many great, intriguing non-conference matchups. This is another one here where we have UCF 3.5-point road favorites, 57.5 the total in this game. Full disclosure, I'm already on UCF, and I know it's not the greatest travel situation. You're talking about Orlando, Florida, all the way to Boise, Idaho. That's not a great situational standpoint type of or a positive expectation situational spot necessarily for UCF. Or a positive scheduling spot, but I just think there's a bigger gap between these 2 teams than this point spread indicates. I mean, I know UCF played a very, very bad Kent State team last week. We don't want to go and overreact too much maybe with that, but I'll tell you what, Boise State, this has been a slowly declining program. This is not anything close to one of the best group of 5 teams in college football anymore. The defense got destroyed through the air by Michael Penix Jr. and that 56-19 walloping that they suffered at the hands of Washington. Now, Washington's got a hell of a football team, but definitely concerning, no doubt, is the way Boise State, struggled, especially against the pass. Now, they were okay against the run, and UCF is a run-first offense, but there has definitely been a concerted effort by UCF with Darren Hinshaw, the new OC. We talked about this coming into the year to really get John Rice Plumlee to really, really improve with the passing game. And I thought he did that. 281 passing yards last week, 3 passing touchdowns. We know his running ability is off the charts. He's a dual threat. He's very athletic. He's dangerous in the open field. But they had to get him to be a more prolific, polished passing quarterback. And I think John Rice Plumlee is working toward that. We've also got a very, very good back as far as Johnny Richardson is concerned at 100 yards on the ground, not to mention R.J. Harvey as well for a UCF. So there's definitely a lot of weapons with this football team. I just think I've got, UCF as a better football team than Boise. I was cool with laying just a field goal with them on the road. Again, I'm going to say it. Talon Green is not – you talk about Plumlee, they're working on his passing game. They better work on Green's passing game too, because he's still got a lot of work to do, Talon Green for Boise State, as far as polishing himself off as a good, accurate quarterback. He's really got a lot of work to do there. UCF to me is just the better football team. And I think Boise has showed you last week. They showed you last year. They've showed you really the last 2 years that this has been not a precipitous drop. It's not like they've fallen off a cliff. But the program has had a steady decline, and I think it's going to continue to show here in this game. So I like UCF here. If the number climbs, maybe ease off, but I think it's still playable for me at least at -3.5. What do you think here, Conor?
Yeah, Boise, it just went down, hill. Green kind of looked okay early, then he just started getting pressure, bad throws, a couple picks. They ran it. I think they need to run it more, Boise, here at home versus UCF to kind of get back to it. But, obviously Plumlee's not Penix, but that secondary, 450 yards through the air, 568. They got to go back to the drawing board. And is it quick enough just 1 week here to maybe get that done? Because you mentioned both teams do want to run it, but there still should be points. I don't know if we mess with this total in this game for me. And I just as much Boise over the years as, at home and getting these points, I gotta see some more. So this was one that was a wait and see for me.
And all those years, we were talking probably 7 to 8 years ago, at least, more like 10 or 15, where you just would never bet against Boise State on the blue turf.
Never.
They were just automatic, as far as, covering numbers at home. And they've been anything but that at home the last, I would say handful of years. They're a losing proposition, ATS, at home, the last several years here, Boise State. So, like I say, as long as the number doesn't go too much higher, I still like UCF here in this one. All right, obviously the next game could be the game of the weekend. Certainly it'll be talked about. Texas, Alabama. Alabama 7-point favorites, 54.5 the total. Credit to Jalen Milroe, man. He played really well, but it's at home against Middle Tennessee, so we got to calm down a little bit. But, he actually made Nick Saban look like he made the right decision here, giving him the starting spot. Again, this is it seems like it's a theme now these last few games. He's got all the athletic ability, Jalen Milroe. Can run with the football. He's got that ability. Can he be an consistent, accurate pocket passer? Can he make good decisions throwing the football? Last week he did 13 of 18 in that game, 194 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Remember, INTs were a bit of an issue for Milroe last year when he started for Alabama. But let's be real, this is not Middle Tennessee anymore. This is the Texas Longhorns, a defense that was completely and utterly dominant last week against Rice, and we didn't expect Rice to do much, but Texas's defense is really good, at least on paper to me coming into this year. On offense, it did take them a while to get going last week, especially in the first half. That was a rough first half from that offense and from Quinn Ewers. I was very, very surprised it took them as long as it did to get going. But that first half was a train wreck for Texas offensively. Now, the second half, they couldn't be stopped pretty much, and they were rolling right through Rice for most of that second half. But it definitely took them a while to get going. I bet this thing, probably a few weeks ago when some books had already posted numbers for this game. I like the dog here. It's a revenge spot for Texas, a game they feel they could have won and maybe should have won last year against Alabama. And I've got to see it from Milroe here against a much higher class of opponent and defense that he's going to face here in this game. So I'm on the dog here. Texas getting a full touchdown. Connor, one of the games of the week for sure. Texas, Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, one difference here, Bama obviously at home compared to last year's game. And then last year, Texas hung in there. And what's Saban against his former coach is like 28-2 ATS or something. They still didn't win, or maybe I don't know the exact number, so don't quote me there. But I remember that game, Bama, 15 penalties in that game for 100 yards. They were just awful, especially the first half. They just couldn't get anything done. This is the early pressure here with Milroe. I mean, can he, get it done? Obviously, Bama has all the weapons. I think I just watched this game. Right now, I don't really want to bet it. I got to see more from both of these teams in this one. So as of now, I'll wait and see.
I mean, 374 to 371 last year as far as the total yardage numbers in that Texas-Alabama game. So it was a dead even game, and Texas, of course, was getting 3 touchdowns in that game against Alabama, and that was with Bryce Young. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
ain't walking through those doors anytime soon, obviously, now that he's in the NFL. So, like I say, I'm on the dog here, Texas. I think this is just like last year, very competitive game down to the wire. All right, Temple and Rutgers. We've got Rutgers, 9.5 point home favorites, 44 the total. I'm very confident in my power rating for Northwestern. They might be the worst Power 5 team right now after what I saw last week. That was god-awful. That was hideous. And that looked like a coaching staff that was just in over their heads. Like this guy that's now the head coach at Northwestern was not expecting to be the head coach. He wasn't. And he was ill-prepared. It's like they had no game plan. They had no identity on offense whatsoever. The O-line was pathetic. Defense couldn't get off the field on third down. Rutgers goes right up and down the field with a quarterback that wasn't even that great last year for Rutgers and Gavin Wimsatt. And I said this on Twitter. Either Gavin Wimsatt has worked like crazy over the offseason to become the second coming of Joe Montana all of a sudden, or Northwestern is that bad on defense right now. But that was hideous out of Northwestern. I am very confident in my power rating on Northwestern. I think they are one of, if not the worst Power 5 team right now in college football. But I don't have confidence in my Rutgers power rating. How much credit do I give this Rutgers team for what happened on Sunday? Because I thought it was Northwestern being that bad, really atrocious. Just the whole, scandal in the offseason really taking a toll. Remember, they had a lot of players jettison out of the program as well. In the offseason, and Rutgers took advantage, and Rutgers played well. And I will give Wimsatt a decent amount of credit, but this is one spot where I don't feel comfortable taking Rutgers, especially laying 9.5 here. Now, Temple was a shockingly dismal performance from them, and especially E.J. Warner at the quarterback position for the Temple Owls last week. And this is a Temple team I thought with definite aspirations to improve significantly this year. And I like the way they played down the stretch. They were a point spread machine down the stretch last year, but that was not pretty against Akron. And I like Akron as a MAC team that's going to really turn some heads and improve this year. Akron is going to be one of those teams, but there's no way you should be struggling that mightily on offense at home against Akron in a 24-21 win. It was very disappointing to see what we got from the Temple offense and E.J. Warner. We'll see how they fare here against Rutgers. Keep in mind, last year these two teams played. It was a September game. Temple was getting 18.5, and Rutgers won that game by 2 last year against Temple. Now, Rutgers did absolutely destroy Temple 2 years ago, 61-14. But last year it was a competitive game. It was a 2-point game. I don't feel comfortable either way on a side. Normally, I like Temple in this role as a dog, and they were very good down the stretch, catching points last year, Connor. They were a machine, ATS down the stretch in this underdog role. But, man, that was rough offensively from them. And Rutgers' defense was suffocating. how much of it was just a bad Northwestern
Yeah.
football team, but they were suffocating on defense. They were excellent. And that's Shiano's bread and butter, is the defensive side of the football. So I have a real tough time wrapping my arms around betting a side in this game. It's that tricky because I don't know how good Rutgers is from beating a horseshit Northwestern side. And I don't know what to make of Temple after a shoddy effort, a shoddy performance, and a narrowest of victory last week against Akron. So a tough game to call. I have the slightest of leans to Temple. I don't know if I'll be betting it, though, at this after what I saw. I want to see if Rutgers can back it up against someone that look, Temple's got flaws. We saw it last week, Connor. They're better than Northwestern. I have no qualms about saying that. Temple is better than Northwestern.
I think so,
this
too.
will be a little bit trickier for Rutgers. What do you think here?
Yeah, and you know what? One thing, Northwestern just was so bad. Rutgers, I thought they were okay. One thing, Rutgers, even last year, against kind of a subpar team here in Temple, obviously with Northwestern, they took care of business. As soon as they stepped up, I couldn't take them as a dog. They got beat up. Where in pass, I want these big numbers. Give me Rutgers. They really didn't cover, but they got it done. It's just, do you want to lay this? I don't really. In the end, is Wimsatt better? The defense, I think, is for Rutgers. But I still think Warner is a better quarterback and could keep them in this game. So, yeah, this was a tough one for me right now as well.
I lean over a little bit just because Rutgers offense, look, they had no problem moving the ball. Temple on defense, look, Akron, especially early in that game, first half, Temple couldn't stop Akron. Actually, they played a much better second half. They really did put the clamps down in the second half, Temple on defense last week. But for the first half, Akron was marching that football, up and down the field. So totals low. Two teams were pretty solid offensively last week. The question is, plus people are betting the under, I think, because look, Rutgers won't move the ball that easily against Temple as they did against Northwestern. And a lot of people seeing what Temple did offensively against Akron last week and Rutgers defense. So I understand the initial move to the under for sure, but the more it drops, the more I might look the other way, but we'll see closer to kickoff. Next up, Southern Miss and Florida State. We got 3 games left. Florida State, 31-point home favorites, 53 being the total in this one. I mean, the only thing you question here is the spot, right? For Florida State, they're off that huge, huge win against LSU, just absolutely dominant. I can't say enough about Florida State, how good they look. Like and LSU ain't chopped liver. LSU's a very good football team, and Florida State made them look like a peewee football team in the second half. I mean, it was amazing. The all lines just driving LSU off the line of scrimmage. Benson running the ball, Jordan Travis making plays through the air with his legs, the Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman duo at receiver, spectacular, even with Johnny Wilson dropping, a couple of passes during that. Keon Coleman, man, what a find for Mike Norvell getting him from Michigan State.
Yeah. I had his prop.
Yeah.
He came through huge, yeah.
He did a hat trick of touchdowns in that game. Just load, and their offensive line, 200 starts back on the offensive line for Florida State, and boy, did it look like it. I mean, that's insane. I don't think I've ever seen that before. Over 200 career starts returning for Florida State for the Seminoles on the offensive line. That is impressive. That's experience right there. And boy, they pushed LSU around the more that game went last week on Sunday night. They are extremely dangerous. They are extremely good. They're not a team I'm rushing to bet against, but you cannot love the spot. They're off that dominant win, commanding second half. Everyone's going to, sing their praises this week about, just the expectations now to win the ACC, especially with Clemson's loss against Duke, that now Florida State probably, at least on paper, looks like the favorite, the team to beat in the ACC right now. Playoff-bound team possibly. National championship contender. Everybody's saying it now about Florida State, and I don't disagree with any of that. But we're talking about 60 minutes of focus, laying 31 points, doing so against a Southern Miss team that I actually think could be a sneaky team as far as improvement. Now, are they outmanned? Absolutely. Of course. They're outmanned at pretty much every position here. And I still worry about the quarterback spot for them. Zach Wilkie's questionable. So as far as the quarterback scenario for Southern Miss, Billy Wiles, he was good last week. They beat Alcorn State 40-14, 267 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. So Billy Wiles did impress for Southern Miss, but You can't compare Alcorn State's defense to Florida State, obviously. But again, this is just going to be a matter of, is Florida State a little sleepy at times in this game? You do have to ask yourself that question, and they are laying a big number. Betting markets don't seem to think there's going to be any sort of letdown or hangover or look ahead for Florida State, as they opened 28. They're 31 now in this game. So don't know if I bet the game. I doubt I will. But just beware, this is a situational spot that is at the very least a little dubious for Florida State, even though they looked just absolutely awesome, lights out on both sides of the football against LSU. What do you think here, Connor?
Yeah, maybe this is one too where they're a little bit, first half, a little bit groggy.
That's what I'm thinking. First quarter, first half. If you have the balls, if you have the guts, if you have the stones to take Southern Miss, maybe you take them early in the game only.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. They're just, like you talked about, though, the talent outgun here. Ken Wiles, it was Alcorn. I mean, can he do that here? I was really impressed the second half, like you talk about, both the lines, just how, blowing LSU, like you talked about. The defense was very good, especially the second half, as they bring back basically everyone almost on that defense for Florida State. So, yeah, maybe early here. I still think Florida State pulls away, and I was impressed. I just think he's gotten better basically every year, has Jordan Travis. And I talked about it on the live stream we were on, Savannah. Keon Coleman, real deal. That's why I took his prop. Like, he was the lone playmaker for Michigan State, like the guy last year in a team with horrible quarterback, just a horrible team. So with him and Wilson, even though he had a couple drops you talked about, two big guys that, man, it's going to be tough for secondaries to stop them.
Worth noting, Southern Miss has a pretty decent defense. Last year, we saw it on full display. Southern Miss, not bad at all on the defensive side of the football. But again, you got to now try to stop what's a Florida State offense that, just could do some significant damage. And as much as I like that defense, let's be real, the O-line for Florida State, not only is it littered with experience in the 200 starts, but they're big. They're massive human beings. And they could just completely – like I say, wear down Southern Miss's front seven as the game goes on. That's why I say if you subscribe to the letdown or the hangover after the big win against LSU, bet Southern Miss early and maybe just early. Don't tempt the full game where Florida State could wake up from their slumber and just roll in the second half like they did against LSU. So, like I say, it would be Southern Miss first quarter, first half only if I were to get involved in their side at any point. All right, Stanford USC. In the Pac-12 conference game here in the second game of the season for these two teams, actually third game of the season for USC because they played San Jose State in week 0. We've got USC 28.5, 29-point home favorites, 68.5 the total in this game. Better from the USC defense last week, but USC defense that did not play that well against San Jose State. They were a lot better against Nevada, but also you have to factor in that Nevada's offense isn't as good as San Jose State. So I think that probably played a role in USC playing better defensively in that game. One thing you cannot dispute is this offense for USC. It is just scary what they're able to do on that side of the ball. I mean, Caleb Williams, 66 and 56 points for the Trojans in their first two games. Just been absolutely sensational, throwing the ball, running with it when he needs to. Marshawn Lloyd and Quentin Joyner in the backfield, Taj Washington, Deuce Robinson, Mario Williams. I mean, just tons of weapons. Just sick how many skill position weapons USC has on offense this season. There's no question about it. But for as well as Stanford played against Hawaii, let's give Stanford credit. Troy Taylor, just an immense rebuilding job here with the Cardinal this year. There were definitely some positives. What I loved more than anything, Connor Mack, about Stanford football last week against Hawaii is David Shaw, ding dong, the witch is dead, is what I like to say when it comes to David Shaw. 1980s dinosaur era football, 2 yards in a cloud of dust, 4th and 2 on the opponent 40-yard line, we're punting. 4th and goal on the 2-yard line, we're kicking a field goal. That's what we saw all these years with Stanford, all this shit. And it's just get your mind wrapped around the way football is played in 2023. And even in just one game, one data point for Stanford against Hawaii, we saw creativity, we saw explosiveness, we saw a little bit of tempo at times, for the Stanford offense in this game, something we saw nothing from Stanford's offense, as far as tempo or pace or explosiveness for much of the David Shaw days. Finally we saw some of that last week from Stanford's offense. They were actually fun to watch. Do you know the last time I thought, wow, what a fun team to watch, the Stanford Cardinal, before last week? It had been years. You got to go back to Jim Harbaugh and Andrew Luck probably. The last time a Stanford team on offense was fun to watch. I had fun watching that team perform last week against Hawaii. I thought Ashton Daniels was very good. 25 for 36, 248 passing yards in that game, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. I liked what I saw. Clearly, they had the open battle for the quarterback spot in camp, but definitely I think Daniels showed you enough that he's earned that spot. E.J. Smith at running back, solid. John Humphreys, Ruben, and Tiger Bachmeier at receiver, and probably a guy that's going to be one of the better tight ends in the entire country, and Urasek here for Stanford, Ben Urasek. I mean, just absolutely spectacular player at the tight end spot. And definitely, I was impressed with Stanford on offense. Now, you could say Hawaii's in a tough spot. They're coming back from the Vanderbilt game, short week, not a great Hawaii defense, but I think you got to give Stanford credit for 37 points and a fluid, fun, explosive, a little bit of tempo, finally a fun team to watch on offense. And it's the kind of offense that could do some damage against a defense like USC, which gave up 28 points to San Jose State. And I'll tell you what, I'd put Stanford's offense ahead of the Nevada offense that USC faced last week. So I think there's potential for Stanford to do a little bit of damage here in this game. Now, I don't know if they're going to stop USC. That's the problem, because their defense last week against Hawaii, they struggled. They were good early, but later and later in that game, Hawaii started to move the ball a little bit against them, and you cannot compare Hawaii to USC on the offensive side of the football. Stanford will have their trouble containing and shutting down this USC team. So my immediate thought is over the total. It's very difficult for me not to bet this. I know it's a high number, 68.5, but you're going to get USC scoring at will like they've done probably, or at least a high number of points. And I think Stanford could really do some damage here against a USC defense that, to be quite honest with you, the jury is still out for me on that stop unit for Lincoln Riley and this USC team. What do you think here, Conor? Stanford, USC?
Yeah, and it might not be here. We got to wait for a good football team for SC, a good offense, and I think the defense will, get gashed. But SC scores easily 50, probably 60 here again. So I get it. I think Stanford at least scores 2, probably 3 touchdowns. This game goes over. And I wouldn't even mess with laying the points with SC. Over, and someone put in the chat their team total. Over, I'd look that way just in case, the back door is live here with Stanford, which still has a lot to go. I had their over 2.5 wins. So Stanford, so we got one. I don't think they get one here, but I think they win 3 games again.
I couldn't give you a better piece of advice than Conor just mentioned it. It's a great point. If you're going to back USC this season, don't take them on the point spread. Don't lay the astronomical points that they're going to be asked to lay, in games like this. Just bet their team total over. To me, that is just the best way to approach it. Then you don't have to worry about what the defense does or doesn't do. You take that sometimes suspect, sometimes leaky USC defense completely out of the equation if you just bet the team total over for USC. That is what I would suggest for this game and moving forward with USC. Look, it came to fruition against San Jose State, the first game. If you had laid the points with USC, you wouldn't have covered. But if you took the USC team total over in that game, you would have cashed. And obviously the team total over again. Now, they did cover the point spread last week against Nevada. But, again, you don't always want to tempt, fate with that, with this USC defense that still can be a little bit shaky at times. So keep that in mind. I think if you like USC in any game, you just bet the team total over. And I will tell you right now, if you do that, you're not going to be stressing as much late in the game with that compared to, say, laying the points with them. All right, the final game of this edition of Hitting the Books for Week 2 in college football, a very intriguing game on the West Coast here, Auburn and Cal. We've got Auburn 6.5-point road favorites, 54.5, 55 being the total in this game. Auburn, tell you what, the Hugh Freeze era begins with a bang at Auburn. That offense, man, it was humming. It was humming right from the get-go last week against UMass, and it really didn't stop. Keep in mind, this was a UMass team that was ultra impressive, in their first game against New Mexico State. Almost double-digit underdog they opened in that game. They ended up winning it outright, and they were just no match, especially on the defensive side of the football for Auburn's offense. Very, very impressive offensive debut and showing for Hugh Freeze's Auburn Tigers as they put a beat down on UMass 59-14 in that victory. They were able to have a solid amount of success running the football, Auburn, but really it was through the air where a lot of the damage was done for the Auburn Tigers. Peyton Thorne, really solid throwing the ball. 289, like I said, rushing yards. They ran the football extremely effectively. Sean Jackson, Jeremiah Cobb, Damari Alston, among others, really doing a nice job in terms of running that rock right down UMass's throat. And look, say what you will about Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze is a very, very solid offensive-minded football coach. He has been that everywhere he has been, no question about that. And a very good first showing for him with Auburn. But you talk about another offense that's really changed its stripes. Justin Wilcox, all these years, he's a mediocre quarterback play, stodgy offense, run-first offense, very slow-paced, methodical offense. Well, it's been a 360-degree turn for the California Golden Bears offense entering this season. And I don't know how much you got to see, Conor, or anyone in the chat got to see that Cal North Texas game. They were lightning fast tempo-wise, picking up the pace. Their new offensive coordinator used to be an incarnate word. He brings over this, up-tempo offense, a quarterback that he had there as well, and Sam Jackson, not Samuel L. Jackson, just Sam Jackson at quarterback here for Cal. And, you look at what I saw from them offensively, man, you talk about a high ceiling for Cal's offense, definitely something to keep in mind. It is worth noting that it's funny that Sam Jackson gets injured during that game against North Texas, and you think, here we go. This team's going to be in trouble with Sam Jackson injured and exiting that game. But in steps Ben Finley at quarterback for Cal, someone who had been previously, elsewhere and transferred into Cal this offseason. Man, he picked up the slack pretty well. 24 of 34, 70% completions, 279 passing yards. Sam Jackson is questionable for Cal. We'll have to wait and see if he's available for this game, but there's no doubt they had no problem moving the ball, even with Ben Finley coming into that game at quarterback for Cal, and they just ran the football like crazy. You talk about incredible production on the ground, 357 rushing yards for Cal in that 58-21 beatdown over North Texas, including 188 rushing yards alone for Jaden Ott, the running back for the Golden Bears. So they did whatever they wanted in terms of running the ball and throwing the ball against, admittedly, not a very good North Texas defense. It's going to be a lot tougher to do that here against Auburn and their defense. They are betting this total down, which to me is a peculiar move, even with the question marks for Cal at quarterback, whether Jackson will suit up or whether Finley is in there again, because you know what we saw at Auburn's offense last week. Looked very good at both running it and throwing it with Thorne at quarterback. I don't know how good Cal's defense is. Cal's defense, most part under Wilcox, has been good. Last year there was some warts on it. They played all right against North Texas, but they also had a big lead, and North Texas had to become one-dimensional. I'm still not totally sold on Cal's defense entirely. And as for Cal's offense, look, they're playing at an extremely faster rate of pace and tempo this year. And I said in betting that Cal North Texas over, one of the easiest winners I had last weekend, that they're not accounting for Cal's change in tempo. I mean, that total was in the low 50s in that Cal North Texas game. And here we go again with this one where it's sitting in the mid 50s and they're betting this sucker under, which to me is not the right move, especially even if Jackson maybe doesn't suit up, because Finley came in and played well. They play fast. Auburn's got an offense that's extremely well balanced. I think asking these two teams to combine to get over a 54-55 type total, it's not asking too much. So I'm definitely looking at the over, and I'm just going to wait it out, see if I can get an even better number by Saturday. What do you think here, Conor, with Auburn taking on Cal?
Yeah. One thing, though, this isn't the North Texas defense. So But both teams are going to run it. Can they stop? That just had great success, like you talked about. Both teams were able to just run it with ease, and UMass and North Texas. Yeah, the question marks with Sam Jackson. Their good center, who's been there for years, got hurt too for Cal. They've got a couple injuries going into this one. Man, I want to see more, from Cal. I don't know if Jackson's going to play or Finley. And I just thought they would be maybe the big win kind of hurts here, but man, I thought they could be over. This would be 9.5, like something like that with Cal at home. And the pace is different, like you mentioned. Because in the past, maybe the days are over of the Cal under. So and maybe people are going to that. No more shitty schools here. We just played week 2. Big boys come to play, so maybe that's why it's trickling down. So I'm going to monitor the total here kind of all week, see how it goes.
I'm doing the math, and you mentioned it. Cal does, it's a tempo offense, but they're an offense that really relies on the run every bit as much, if not more, than the pass, and that will be the case certainly if Ben Finley plays again. But Jaden Knott's a hell of a running back, and I know it was North Texas's defense, which leaves a lot to be desired. But I was impressed with what we saw from him running the ball. And you have over 200 rushing yards. I don't care who it is against. That's very impressive. And when you actually look at Auburn's run defense last week, K'Ron Lynch-Adams, who is the primary back for UMass, he actually ran for 100 yards against this Auburn defense last week in the game at 7.2 yards per carry. Yeah, 14 rush attempts, 101 rushing yards. So just based on that, maybe Cal can have some success running the football here against Auburn, which certainly opened things up completely for the Cal offense if they're able to do that. So interesting to see how this goes. As far as the side, it's very tricky for me. I don't love betting against Cal as a dog. The long-term numbers point out, especially under this head coach, Conor Mack, and you know this well. We've talked about Cal as a dog for many years. It's not always where I want to be betting against California when they're an underdog. They've usually been pretty good in this point spread role, and it is tricky scheduling spot and travel situation for Auburn, going all the way from the southeast all the way to basically the northwest, almost the northwest though, but the northern part of California here for this game against Cal in Berkeley. So that's strenuous travel for Auburn for the first time this year. Let's see how they handle it here. So I'm not saying I'm betting Cal, but there are things that point to Cal. Situationally, they're a long-term good underdog, good in the underdog role. So we'll see if that comes to fruition again here on Saturday night. Great stuff. Awesome show. One day later than normal, but we appreciate everybody joining us here for hitting the books. And again, we're back to our normal day, Monday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific next week. And for the rest of the season, we'll be, of course, back to Mondays at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific with this show. And we want to remind you before we wrap things up that we do have the Cappers contest. Hey, NFL Week 1 is here, folks. Thursday night it kicks off. Lions and Chiefs. There you see it. We're all trying to dethrone, myself included, Peter Loshak, last year's champion. It's a fun contest. Make sure you get involved with it. $100 entry fee, 5 NFL picks weekly against the spread. Sign up now, pubsportsradio.com. The clock is ticking. 1 entry per person. Must be 18 years of age or older. Enter. Cappers contest, get on that. And the Survivor contest as well. Same thing. Sign up, pubsportsradio.com. $100 entry fee. 1 entry per person, 18 years of age or older to enter. Survivor contest, Cappers contest, get on it. Pub Sports Radio.
I like, no 21 here. 18 years of age, that's all you need. And I always got to say, when I see that, Pete looks so happy in that picture there. He's just grinning. There he is. Look at a crown on his head. All right.
He was very happy, as he should be when you're a champion of that. But yeah, he was in his happy place to quote Happy Gilmore, and very fitting. We quote Happy Gilmore with Bob Barker, of course, just recently passing away. But yeah, he was in his happy place, Peter Loshak, when you see that still image of his facial expression there on the graphic. But yeah, get involved with the contests. Definitely looking forward to both of those. Conor, before we shut this thing down, some final words, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, shout out to the chat. I always say the best chat in the goddamn game, period, here at Pub Sports Radio. Appreciate all you guys. But yeah, we got to go where we ran a little late. Go over to Sharpie. Go watch The Walking Dead. Jimmy's on tonight with Troy, the football show, I believe. What's it? Bankroll Blitz. Just remembered it. There we go. Yep. Check them out. NFL is here. That's it.
And Troy Torrance played Division I college football. So this guy's played the sport. He knows
I think D2.
Yeah.
I think he played D1.
I thought he played at Northern Illinois, but yeah,
I don't think so, but we'll double check it.
He played college football.
He did. He played college football.
But Troy Torrance. So, but he's been in that kind of environment, obviously, and that's, I think, a benefit to having a football betting show when you've got someone that's got that background. So make sure you check it out. Bankroll Blitz. Bankroll Blitz. Bankroll Blitz. I always think of that song. Do that, but. Yeah, check it out. Jimmy the Bag and Troy Torrance every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. And they're basically doing what we do with college football. And that's breaking down every NFL game on the board early in the week for that upcoming week, giving you their early thoughts, early opinions on the card. Great stuff. Shout out to everyone in the chat. Hit the like button on the way out. For Connor Mack, I'm Ian Cameron. Enjoy the week ahead in college football. Enjoy the games and good luck. And we'll be back at our regular day and time next Monday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, for another edition of Hitting the Books.